welcome back to Middle-earth. It's good to have you here again. If you've been listening for a while, you already know this is our quiet corner of Arda, a place where the fires burn low, the world slows down, and the stories feel familiar. Tonight, we'll wander through ancient forests, forgotten kingdoms, and the long shadows of the Second and Third Age. No rush, no noise, just the lore of the Lord of the Rings, told gently, like it was always meant to be heard. So, settle in. Let your mind drift to the Shire, to Rivendell, to the white towers of Minas Tirith. And together, let's return to Middle-earth. Ash in the wind, an eagle's shadow over Mordor. In the grey ash of the Third Age, above a land where the very ground smoulders, a lone great eagle beats its vast wings against a poisoned sky. Heat rises in wavering curtains. Smoke coils upward in slow, suffocating spirals. Far below, Mordor smoulders like an open wound in the world. You can almost feel the air thinning as it climbs. Each sweep of the eagle's pinions sends eddies of cinder swirling, brushing against invisible currents of power that lie like hidden rivers over Sauron's realm. This is not a gentle wind. It is the breath of a furnace, tasting of iron, old blood, and the grey memory of burned forests. And there, around one hooked talon, hangs a small band of gold. It does not shine cleanly, even in the harsh light that bleeds through the smoke. The ring seems to drink the glow around it, to bend the light so that the air just above the eagle's claws looks thicker, darker, as if the weight it bears is not only of metal, but of centuries of malice. Even here at this impossible height, you can almost hear it. A whisper, a promise, a pressure at the edge of thought. The eagle feels it too. Not a mere beast, not simply a great bird, but an ancient spirit bound in feather and bone, answering to powers beyond the circles of this world. Yet even this mighty will trembles for a heartbeat as the ring presses upward, not downward, as if it is trying to rise into the mind that carries it. The story behind the story is that no creature, however high it flies, is entirely beyond that call. From this height, the land of Mordor unrolls like a black map. We journey into its geometry of war. Mountain rings, jagged and cruel, weld the realm shut. Watchtowers pierce the haze, their beacons and red slits of window fire staring outward in every direction. Below, the black road to Barad-dûr gleams like obsidian, crowded with marching orcs, siege towers and great engines dragged by chains. Even the shadows seem organized. We cut in our mind's eye from that high, perilous vantage to the ground, to orc patrols scanning the ridges, to archers on battlements, armor filmed with ash, to the winged shapes of Nazgul sweeping the lower clouds, their fell beasts tasting the wind. Mordor is not an empty target. It is a living fortress, awake in every stone. And here, a quieter voice enters. This is the vision so many of us have imagined. One swift flight, one daring drop, the fate of Middle-earth settled by a single plunge into fire. But as we hover with this eagle above the plains, can you feel how the world itself resists? The air is too watched. The sky is already taken. Far away, yet terribly near, the dark tower rises. The eye of Sauron burns atop it, a wound of flame, ceaseless, sleepless. It does not need to see the eagle to sense the change in its sky. The ash shifts. The wind falters. A presence moves where none should be. Slowly, inexorably, the eye turns upward. Dim the lights, get comfortable. As that gaze begins to search the clouds, we uncover a harder question. Could any flight bearing the one ring over this land ever have remained unseen? Círdan at the Havens, When the eagles first enter the story, the eye searches the clouds. The ring would blaze to it like a coal in the dark. And as we pull back from that terrible gaze, we journey into an older mist, to remember what it means when anything comes out of the west at all. In the grey mists of the Grey Havens, at the very edge of the world, an ancient elf stands upon a stone quay. Círdan the shipwright, older than most mountains men have named, watches the long swell of the sea. A single ship glides toward him, pale sail ghosting through the fog, and the cry of distant gulls mingles with the sighing of the waves. He has seen this before. Not this ship, not this cloaked figure in grey upon the deck, but this moment, a messenger from beyond the bent world, crossing the hidden roads of the sea. For Círdan remembers other ages. He remembers when the West sent not grey wanderers but eagles. In the first age, when the shadow of Morgoth lay heavy on Beleriand, vast wings once beat over the ruined towers of Thangorodrim. Thorondor and his kin were not taxis for elves in distress. They were heralds of Manwë, war eagles of the elder days, raking dragons from the sky and tearing iron crowns with beaks of storm. Their coming was judgment or mercy or both, but never convenience. That is the story behind the story of any arrival from the West. Not a delivery service, not a flying shortcut. Emissaries, each with their own purpose, their own limits, their own obedience to a higher will that even the wise of Middle-earth can only guess at. When such beings appear, the fate of Middle-earth is bending. The world is being nudged at its hinges. Now the ship grates softly against the stone. The grey pilgrim steps ashore leaning on a staff. His eyes are weary but clear. Círdan looks at him for a long time, and in that gaze he weighs this stranger against the long memory of eagles over ancient battlefields and Valar who rarely lift their hands. He sees burden. He sees pity. He sees that this one has not come to command armies. So Círdan does something no one expects. Quietly, secretly, he gives Gandalf Narya the Red Ring, the Ring of Fire. Not to make him a general, not to turn him into a living siege engine, but to strengthen hearts against despair. In the same thought, he remembers how long ago Manwë sent the eagles to watch over Middle-earth, not to serve its every errand, not to be summoned like hired wings at a cry of need. From Círdan's perspective, a pattern is clear. Powers from beyond the sea do not act on demand. They move at turning points, at Gondolin's fall, at the War of Wrath, at the breaking of Sauron's first strength, and then fall silent for centuries. And for 2,000 hidden centuries of mortal fear and hope, they leave the roads to elves and men, and one day, hobbits. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable. Because as Gandalf walks away from the havens and the grey gulls wheel overhead, Círdan watches the empty sky and wonders, if such beings walk and fly again in Middle-earth, what pleas will they ignore? What tasks will they refuse, and why? Hold that question over any dream of an eagle airdrop into Mordor, because the next part of this story will show us exactly where those wings will not go. The question that won't die: why not just fly? So let's finally open the door that everyone keeps rattling. If Círdan is watching the empty sky and wondering which pleas will be ignored, then you and I are probably wondering the same thing the internet has been asking for years. If the eagles can pluck Frodo and Sam off the slopes of Mount Doom, why on earth didn't they just fly them in at the beginning and save us 3 books of grey wanderings and misery? Why march through the shadow when you could book an express flight to the cracks of doom? You've seen this question everywhere. It shows up in memes with photoshopped eagles wearing sunglasses. It's a running joke in parodies, in late-night debates, in that one friend's actually speech at movie night. It's the nagging thought that creeps in on a reread. Wait, are we all just ignoring a giant plot hole? And we're not going to dismiss that as silly, because if it bothers you, it matters. It means you're paying attention to the story behind the story. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable. Let's step together into this so-called eagle airdrop and treat it seriously, because to answer it, we can't just wave a hand and say, Tolkien said no. We have to ask, what are the eagles really? What does Sauron truly see and command in the skies over Mordor? What does the ring actually do to powerful beings who come near it? Each of those questions opens onto the hidden centuries behind this one, deceptively simple meme. When we journey into those deeper layers, the eagle question stops being a nitpick and becomes a doorway. Through it, we uncover Tolkien's theology, his sense of providence, his quiet distrust of grand shortcuts that promise to skip the hard roads. Why does he choose hobbits instead of heroes, walking instead of flying, weakness instead of spectacle? Why does the fate of Middle-earth hang on bare feet in the ash rather than on wings in the sun? This isn't going to be a quick patch, the narrative equivalent of slapping duct tape over a leaky plot. It's an invitation to see how carefully the whole world is built. The great eagles are not fantasy taxis waiting at the edge of the map. Sauron's realm is not an empty sky waiting to be crossed. The ring is not a passive trinket that can be flown like luggage. Once we sit with that, the question, why not just fly, turns into, what would flying have broken? Because by the end of this deep dive into Middle-earth lore, the goal isn't just that you can win an argument in a comment thread. The goal is that you'll feel, in your bones, why the eagles could not carry the ring, and why, if they had, the entire heart of the story would have fallen from the sky. In the next section, we start with the eagles themselves, and what kind of ancient power you're really summoning when you call their name. Names in the wind. Who the eagles really are. So, to answer why the eagles did not bear the ring, we first have to answer a quieter question. Who are we actually calling when we call them? Not feathers, not flight, but names that move like wind over an ancient mountain range. In the Silmarillion, before hobbits ever walked their green roads, the great eagles appear as spirits of the upper air, the messengers and eyes of Manwë, Lord of the Winds. They are not clever animals trained to carry messages. They are, Tolkien hints, inhabited by Maiar, or beings very near to them in kind, immortal intelligences who take the shape of vast birds, because that is how they choose to move through the grey sky. When we journey into those earlier ages, we uncover that the eagles belong first to the high councils of the Valar, and only distantly to the daily struggles of Middle-earth below. Listen to their names, and you can feel the scale. Thorondor, mightiest of all, whose wingspan in the First Age is said to shadow a league, scars Morgoth himself, and rescues Fingon and Maedhros from the precipices of Thangorodrim. Gwaihir the Windlord, swift and stern, bears Gandalf from Orthanc and later from the very brink of death upon Zirac-Sigil. Landraval, his brother, comes with him to the Battle of the Morannon, soaring beside kings and captains as the world's last gamble is played at the Black Gate. These are not mounts in a stable, they move in the same sentences as Valar and High Kings, as if they stand alongside the great, not beneath them. And Tolkien is very clear about this in the story behind the story. In his letters, he warns that the eagles are not a convenient mode of transport. They do not wait on call like Middle-earth Uber, circling above the Shire until someone whistles. They arrive as rare agents of providence, appearing at turning points the characters themselves did not plan. The burning trees and howling goblins in The Hobbit, the breaking of the siege of Gondor, the fall of Barad-dûr. Who summons them? Often no one that we can see. They are the wind's own decision. So when we joke about just fly the ring to Mordor, we're quietly flattening all of that. We turn angelic powers into taxi drivers. But within the legendarium's own logic, beings of this rank have their own will, their own taboos, their own hidden wanderings above the clouds. They answer first to Manwë and to the deep music of the world, not to council meetings in Rivendell. Would they even consent to be used as beasts of burden for a mortal plan, however desperate? All right, dim the lights, get comfortable. Because if the eagles are closer to angels than pigeons, what are we really asking when we imagine them carrying the most corrupting object in existence straight into the heart of its master's power? In the next section, we'll step together into that question and into the shadowed skies over Mordor itself. 2,000 years of waiting, setting the timeline. So to really feel the weight of the eagle question, we have to pull the camera back. Not to the skies over Mordor, but to the long grey road of history beneath them. Because by the time a hobbit in the Shire ever whispers the word ring, Middle-earth has already spent 2,000 years learning that there are no easy flights into the heart of the shadow. The Second Age ends in fire and ruin. On the slopes of Orodruin, Elendil falls, Isildur cuts the ring from Sauron's hand, and the Dark Lord's body is overthrown. The year is 3441. The Third Age begins with a broken victory. Sauron's spirit flees. The One Ring is not unmade, and the eagles who once wheeled openly in the War of Wrath withdraw to their high eyries. There is peace, yes, but it is not the peace of healing. It is the uneasy quiet of a world that has survived an apocalypse and knows it could come again. Centuries pass. Numenor is a memory drowned beneath the sea, its pride now only in the tall towers of Gondor and the scattered airs of Arna. Those realms begin to fade, harried by wars, plagues, and division. The northern kingdom shatters into smaller realms and then into ruins. The southern clings to its glory but grows thin. Elves retreat to grey harbours and hidden valleys, their eyes already turned west. The eagles, too, change. Once they were heralds of Manwë in open war. Now they are watchers on the margins, guardians more than generals, answering rarely and only when the fate of Middle-earth hangs in the balance. And then, at the year 1000 of this long Third Age, something moves in the west. The Valar send the Astari. Gandalf arrives at the Grey Havens, and with him begins a new phase of the same ancient struggle. Círdan gives him Narya, the Ring of Fire, so that he can stir hearts, not lead armies. Around this same time, the watch of the eagles over the east is renewed. We journey into one of those hidden centuries where nothing spectacular seems to happen, yet everything is quietly prepared. From that point on, Gandalf's wanderings and the eagle's high vigilance run in parallel. He walks the roads of men, dwarves, and hobbits. They wheel above the wild, bearing tidings, spying out movements in the dark. Together with Elrond, Galadriel, and the wise, he slowly uncovers that Sauron is not gone, only gathering. Dol Guldur rises, falls, and rises again. The White Council meets and delays. And for nearly 2,000 years the lesson is hammered home. Every attempt to grasp at quick victory, at overwhelming force, twists toward ruin. So when Frodo finally steps out of the Shire, he is not walking into a fresh problem. He is stepping into the last act of a drama that has been unfolding since the Second Age. Gandalf has already refused the ring. Galadriel has already refused it. Even the Valar, by sending the Istari in old bodies instead of in blazing wrath, have already chosen patience over cataclysm. If the eagles were the obvious answer, why did none of these powers, across 20 centuries of fear and foresight, ever say, "Very well then, we'll just fly it in"? In our next section, we'll step together into that silence and ask what the wise had seen in the skies over Mordor that made the straight line the most dangerous road of all. What this video will actually do, and what it won't. So in this section, we draw the map before we march. We've stood in that silence around the wise and their long, patient fear. Now we have to ask not just what they knew, but what we are actually going to do with that knowledge. Our thesis is simple to say and far more intricate to prove. We journey into why the eagles did not, and more importantly, could not fly the ring to Mordor, logistically, spiritually, politically, and narratively. Not as a meme, not as a throwaway plot hole, but as a way of seeing the hidden machinery that holds this ancient story together. By the end, when someone at a party raises an eyebrow and says, "Why not just take the birds?" you will have more than a shrug. So what are the pillars we're going to walk through together? First, the eagles themselves. Not taxis, not Middle-earth's Uber, but beings who stand closer to angels than animals, tied to Manwë, to the War of Wrath, to the fate of Middle-earth in an age long before hobbits. We uncover why they appear rarely, why even Tolkien warned that they are not a convenient mode of transport, and why their very nature makes the ring a deadly proximity for them. Then we rise into Sauron's sky. We'll trace his air defences, the Nazgûl on fell beasts, the watchtowers, the archers, the siege engines, the eye that turns the grey heavens over Mordor into a spiritual no-fly zone. Imagine trying to cross that world unseen with the one object he is hunting. Could a single wing beat really escape his notice? From there we descend into the ring itself. We'll look at how its corruption scales with power, why Gandalf, Galadriel, even the almost untouchable Bombadil refuse it, and what that means for mighty eagle minds. We'll follow the roads and ridges of Mordor's geography, the mountain walls, the distances, the visibility, until the straight line route begins to look like the loudest, brightest path of all. And under all of this, we'll keep returning to Tolkien's design as a storyteller. This is where we step into the story behind the story. Why the tale is about small courage, long wanderings, and costly mercy, not about divine airstrikes that erase risk. We'll ask how a shortcut like the Eagle Plan would fracture the themes of sacrifice, providence, and trust that hold the entire age together. This is not a video about mocking fans who ask the question. It is about taking that question seriously enough to reveal the hidden centuries of thought behind it. So dim the lights, get comfortable. This will not be a quick listicle or a rapid-fire debunk. It's a slow, immersive flight, through deep dives into Middle-earth lore, through grey skies and forgotten wars. And when we land, you'll not only be able to answer the eagle debate with calm confidence, you may find a new respect for the fragile, hard-won path Tolkien actually chose. In the next section, we begin with the eagles themselves, far above the Shire, where the wind is thin and the decisions of the Valar still echo. Before we fly, a fireside pause with you. Far above the Shire, the wind is thin, the clouds are torn, and our imagined eagle beats its ancient wings, circling, waiting for us to decide what to do with it. But before we send this great spirit diving toward Mordor, let's draw back from the ash and the fire for just a moment and look instead at where you are. Because every time we journey into Middle-earth together, I like to imagine this as a kind of wandering in at the end of a long road. The fire is low, the walls are lined with old maps, and tonight you have found your way to the circle around the hearth. So who has gathered here in this age of glowing screens and restless shadows? Are you listening with headphones in the dark, long after you were meant to sleep? Are you on a rainy afternoon, letting the grey light at your window blend with the grey light over the misty mountains? Or are you halfway through a long commute, moving through your own misty mountains of traffic and taillights while the fate of Middle-earth plays out on your dashboard? Most of you, by the way, who find your way to this fire are not actually subscribed. You wander in, you listen to the story behind the story, and then you vanish again into the hidden roads of the algorithm. If you've watched this far, you are probably one of the quiet ones who loves slow, lore-rich journeys, who doesn't mind when we linger in the forgotten corners and the hidden centuries. If that's you, consider pressing subscribe not as a transaction, but as a way of joining a small company of travelers who keep coming back to the same inn, the same table, the same well-worn tales. Because what we do here together is not just argue about plot holes. We uncover why the eagles aren't taxis, what Gandalf was really doing in those long, grey wanderings between the great wars, how questions about rings and wizards and air defences become doors into a much larger legendarium. Your support, whether it's subscribing, leaving a like, or telling us in the comments where and when you're listening, quite literally lets me keep making deep dives into Middle-earth lore, into Gandalf's hidden years, the Blue Wizard's vanished mission, and all the quiet choices that shaped the world long before Frodo ever stepped out his front door. So, if you feel like you've found your people here, tell us, where are you in the world, and what hour of your own story is this? I read those, and it turns this from a lone voice into a fellowship scattered across time zones and continents. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable once more. Let's step together into the ash-laden sky again, where our solitary eagle still wheels above the black land, and ask at last, could it truly have flown the ring into the heart of Mordor? Settle in, returning to the mists of the Third Age. So before we dive into air defences and Nazgul patrol routes, let's reset the room together. If you can, dim the lights, get comfortable under your blanket again. Let the glow of your screen be the last little star over Mordor. Maybe you turn on a fan or a rain track in the background. Let that low, steady sound become the ancient wind pouring over the Black Mountains, tugging at feathers and cloaks as we journey into the ash-laden sky. Because from here on, we're not just arguing with a meme, we're planning a mission. Let's step together into the mists of the late Third Age. The Long Watch is almost spent. Nearly 3,000 years have passed since Isildur cut the ring from Sauron's hand. And in that long grey interval, kingdoms have risen and fallen, roads have crumbled, and even the wise have begun to doubt their own memories. The ring is about to stir again in the forgotten West, and every power in the world, great and small, will soon have to choose a path. Where will they stand when the fate of Middle-earth tips? Moving quietly through this age is the Grey Pilgrim. Gandalf does not thunder across battlefields. He walks. He slips in at the back of feasts, listens at the edges of councils, vanishes down hidden forest tracks. He is the one who will sit for an evening with a hobbit over pipeweed, and for a century over lore with Elrond and Galadriel, always searching, always testing the shadow for weak points. Far above him, rarely seen, wheel his distant kin, the great eagles, not pets, not taxis. In the ancient tales of the First Age, they answer to Manwë himself, storm spirits with wings, descending only at great turning points of the world. By the time we reach this late Third Age, they are still there, high over the teeth of the Efelduath and the Broken Plains, watching, waiting, intervening only when the West itself seems to cry out. When they pluck Thorin's company from the burning pines, when they appear over the Black Gate, it is not random mercy. It is the story behind the story. So as we talk about eagles and rings, let's not sit only as armchair critics, pointing at a map from a safe distance. Imagine instead that we are travelers in that age trying to survive Sauron's gaze. If you were Gandalf, would you dare to send a shining, semi-divine herald straight across the heart of the enemy sky? If you were an eagle, would you wager your ancient people on one desperate throw? From this point on, we will walk, no, fly, through the logic of this world step by step, as if we were actually planning an insertion into enemy airspace. Patrol patterns, the ring's corrupting weight, the mountains and watchtowers, the hidden centuries of enmity between West and Shadow. We uncover not just whether the plan could work, but what it would cost. And once we see that clearly, the meme question changes. It's no longer, why didn't they? But, how did anyone dare the skies of Mordor at all? The long defeat. What Middle-earth looks like from above. So to really test this so-called eagle plan, we have to pull back. Higher. Higher still, until the roads and rivers blur, and the whole late Third Age lies beneath us like a grey, wounded map. From the north we look down on a kingdom that is no more. Arna, the ancient realm of Elendel, is not a living power, but a scattering of broken watchtowers and forgotten barrows. Weathertop is a ruin. Cardolan and Rudor are names in old songs. Where once a Númenórean line guarded the north, you now have rangers moving in ones and twos through the shadowed wild, not marshalling fleets of war eagles. Who would even call to the sky from such silence? We drift south, following the spine of the misty mountains, and Gondor comes into view. Not the blazing empire of the early centuries, but a proud house gone thin. The great river still gleams. The white city still rises in 7 circles, yet its borders have shrunk back from Ithilien, from Osgiliath, from those ancient days when its banners flew far into the east. Gondor is watching the landward gates, bleeding on the Anduin, barely holding its own walls. It has no unified air command, no grand alliance charting flight paths with eagles over Mordor. Because men, too, have fallen from their Númenórean height. The great line that once ruled Westernesse now flickers in stewards, in chieftains, in petty kings of Rohan and Dale and the Lake. Brave realms, yes, but fractured, suspicious, bound to their own wars and harvests. When the fate of Middle-earth is on the line, they do not think in terms of angelic air support. Many of them barely believe the old tales anymore. Look for the elves from above, and you do not see launching pads. You see refuges. Rivendell is a hidden cleft in the hills, half vanished under trees and mist. Lorien is a golden island in a sea of shadowed forest, its borders fiercely guarded, its people already turned inward, preserving what little remains of an older age. The grey havens lie at the very edge of the world, a harbour not of invasion, but of departure. These are pockets of light retreating from the world, not forward bases for a bold aerial strike. The dwarves are deeper still, under mountains. Erebor, the Iron Hills, the Blue Mountains. Their eyes are on mithril veins and ancient grudges, not on coordinating with sky spirits they barely know. And in a small green corner of the map, the Shire curls up like a forgotten leaf. Hobbit's Garden, smoke, tell stories. Most of them have never even heard a great eagle's name. From this height, we uncover something sobering. Almost no one in Middle-earth truly understands what the eagles are or could be. Cooperation is rare. Trust between realms is thin. There is no council, no alliance, prepared to gamble everything on a single high-risk, all-or-nothing plunge into the heart of the enemy's sky. And that raises the next, sharper question. Even if someone had dared to dream such a plan, what kind of world would those eagles be flying into? 5 wizards, many limits, the Astari and the eagles. Into that sky, before any eagle's wing beats once, we have to look at the other great servants of the West, the wizards. Because the world those eagles would be flying into has already been shaped by an older decision, made far across the sea. Into this grey, shadowed age come 5 Istari, ancient Maya spirits veiled in the frailty of old men, not conquerors, not generals, but counselors. They are sent by the Valar with chains on their power and limits on their glory, forbidden to dominate the wills of elves and men, forbidden to simply unleash the kind of raw force that once broke Thangorodrim in the First Age. And for nearly 2,000 years they walk the hidden roads of Middle-earth, their wanderings quiet, their miracles small, meant to kindle courage rather than blaze like open war. Gandalf the Grey is the one we know best, but even he is not a commander in the modern sense. His authority is persuasive, not absolute. He can urge Elrond, debate Saruman, warn Denethor, plead with Theoden, but he cannot make them. The same is true of the great eagles. They are not his air force. They are allies of Manwë, semi-divine beings with their own long memories of the First Age and the War of Wrath, answering at times to Gandalf's call because his purposes align with the West, not because he holds some secret whistle that makes them obey. This is the story behind the story when an eagle appears at a desperate moment. It is not a taxi dispatch. It is a rare convergence of need, timing, and higher permission. Tolkien himself hints that the eagles are moved at need by the Valar, not by mortal scheduling. So when we journey into those spectacular rescues, the burning trees in The Hobbit, the Black Gate in The Return of the King, we are seeing exceptions granted under strict, invisible rules. And here is the pattern interrupt. If the Valar themselves, who once overthrew Morgoth, refuse in this age to march on Mordor and simply crush Sauron, what sense would it make for their servants to do what they will not? The Astari are explicitly sent as a restrained answer, not a repeat of the cataclysmic interventions of old. The eagles, too, are bound into that same philosophy of restraint. No more continent-shattering wars. No more divine shock and awe. This time the fate of Middle-earth must turn on the courage of the small. So imagine Gandalf, who will not even touch the One Ring without dread, who fears to take it lest he become a power too great and terrible. On what ground could he ask a great eagle, proud, mighty, and perilously close to that same temptation, to bear the ring straight into Sauron's gaze? If he shrinks from that burden, could he, in good conscience, invite another free, high spirit to risk corruption in his place? All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, because that question leads us to the darkest part of this thought experiment. What, exactly, would the ring do to an eagle in flight over Mordor? Not a taxi service, Tolkien's own warnings about eagles. And here Tolkien himself steps in from beyond the page and quietly shakes his head. In his letters written in that plain professorial voice, he warns us that the eagles are not a Middle-earth taxi service. He calls them dangerous machines in storytelling, a temptation to be used only at great need, because they slide so easily into Deus Ex Machina. He stresses that they are not at the beck and call of wizards or hobbits, not a convenient air force waiting on the runway, but proud, perilous beings who answer first to higher powers, far beyond the roads of the Third Age. If we journey into the earlier tale of The Hobbit, we already see this restraint at work. The eagles do not simply notice a few lost dwarves and decide to give them a lift. They are drawn by a loud, fiery battle. Goblins swarming, wargs howling, trees burning like torches against the night. Only then do they stoop from the high air, and even so they do not carry Thorin's company all the way to the lonely mountain. They set them down on the eaves of their own realm at the edge of the wild and go no farther. Not servants, not steeds, but free lords of the sky, intervening once, then withdrawing back into the grey distance. By the time we reach the Lord of the Rings, Tolkien has learned his own warning by heart. The eagles appear only at climactic, almost liturgical moments, when the fate of Middle-earth hangs by a thread. Gwaihir comes to Orthanc not as Gandalf's personal ride, but as a messenger of the West, sent by Radagast's earlier plea and by Providence. At the Battle of the Morannon, they wheel suddenly into the black storm over the gate, not as a planned assault squad, but as an answering sign to Sauron's last, desperate throw of the Nazgul. And on the slopes of Orodruin, they do not deliver the ring. They retrieve 2 broken hobbits from a dying world. We uncover here the story behind the story. If the eagles started showing up every few chapters, airdropping heroes, skipping journeys, bypassing dangers, what would happen to their ancient, mythic weight? What would happen to that quiet sense of providence that moves like a hidden wind through the ages? It would curdle into a running gag, a narrative shortcut you could predict on cue. Divine grace would feel cheap, not costly. So when we ask with a smile, why not just use the eagles? We are pressing against a boundary Tolkien himself drew with care. He is telling us, gently but firmly, that some powers must remain rare, distant, almost untouchable. And in the next part, we'll see how that rarity is woven into their very nature, back before the Third Age, back into the high councils of Manwë and the first great wars against the Shadow. Into the no-fly zone, Mordor's skies under Sauron. So when we ask why the eagles do not simply wing their way to Mount Doom, we have to look at where they would be flying. Not a blank map, not an empty sky, but a fortress kingdom whose very borders have been carved into a cage. To understand the eagles, we journey into the land they would have to cross. Mordor itself. Picture it from above, as if we, for a moment, share the far-seeing gaze of Manwë. In the east of the world, Mordor lies cupped between 2 ancient mountain walls, the Ethel Duath in the west and south, the Ered Lithwy in the north, a black horseshoe of stone that pens in the plain of Gorgoroth, and the fiery cone of Orodruin. There are no wide, welcoming roads here, no open borders. Only narrow passes like Cirith Gorgor and the Morannon, the Black Gate, where Sauron has raised watchtowers and walls, each one bristling with eyes, signal fires, and cruel devices tuned to catch the smallest movement in the grey distance. This is the story behind the story of those maps we flip past. Every gap in those mountains is a choke point. Every height is a lookout. For centuries, Sauron has turned the natural geography of Mordor into an enormous trap, a basin of stone whose rim is lined with teeth. And that is just the ground. Above it, the skies are not free. They belong to the Nazgul. When Sauron arms his chief servants with fell beasts, he is not merely giving them mounts, he is building an aerial course. The ringwraiths circle and sweep, their leathery wings beating through ash and smoke, hunting for any sign of intrusion. Their task is explicit: dominate the air, scour the plains, carry the terror of the enemy into every valley. When we uncover Sauron's strategy, we see that he has answered the eagle question from his side. He has made the heavens a battlefield. Beneath them, archers and siege engines stand ready on walls and towers, along the Ethel Duath, around the Morannon, and all about the plain before Barad-dûr. Think of the great engines used against Minas Tirith, now turned upward. Add to that the eye itself, a will like a burning searchlight sweeping land and sky, ever probing for the ring. How long could any great winged shape pass over Gorgoroth without drawing that gaze? And remember the atmosphere of Mordor, ash-choked, cloud-laden, lit from beneath by the red glare of Orodruin. Against that dim, roiling backdrop, a giant eagle is not hidden. It is framed, silhouetted, a moving mark visible for miles, outlined against grey vapours and firelight. Stealth is the first casualty here. The second is time, because once seen, it will not fly alone for long. So imagine, just for a moment, that impossible flight. An eagle burdened with the One Ring, beating its way through the poisoned air above Orodruin. Below, the mountain groans. Above, the clouds boil. And then the answering cry. 9 shrieks, thin and piercing, as the Nazgul wheel in from every quarter, their fell beasts folding the sky around that single, glittering target. In that instant, the fate of Middle-earth hangs on a terrified struggle in the dark air. Would the ring-bearer resist? Would the eagle? Or would something older and more dangerous awaken between them? Because to see why the eagles cannot simply carry the ring, we now have to leave the walls of Mordor and look into the ring's own will. Mission impossible. Planning an eagle strike. Like a real war, to answer that, we have to do something almost no one does with the eagle plan. We have to treat it like an actual war mission. Not a meme, not a shortcut, but a full operation brief that generals and steely-eyed captains would slide across the table in some hidden council room of the West. So imagine the map. Departure from Rivendell, or perhaps from Lorien, if we want to shorten the roads. An eagle carries, or more likely escorts, a ring-bearer lashed into a harness. The flight path must cross the Misty Mountains, swing south of Mirkwood, then angle toward the Effel Duath, hunting for one of the rare gaps in Mordor's jagged wall. Altitude? High enough to clear peaks and towers, low enough that the air is still breathable and the cold does not freeze fingers to the chain. Extraction plan? There isn't one. No one is flying back out of Orodruin's throat. We journey into the question of stealth. Could they fly at night, cloaked in cloud and shadow, slipping between ancient ridges? Perhaps. But then navigation becomes a nightmare. Mountains are not kind silhouettes in the dark. They are stone teeth. A single wrong valley in the Effel Duath, and you do not find a secret pass. You find a dead end under an orc watchtower. Above the clouds, the stars help, yet you are now a black speck against a pale ceiling, easy prey for anything that owns the higher sky. Then, endurance. These are not small birds. The great eagles are mighty, but even they have limits. A burdened flight from Rivendell to Mordor is not an afternoon glide. It is days of exposed travel, with rest needed on lonely spurs of rock or high plateaus. Every landing is a flare on Sauron's board. One more chance for a wandering patrol, a watchful eye, or a Nazgul sweep to notice a shape where none should be. The simple shortcut becomes 3, 5, perhaps 7 days under constant, tightening observation. And now, contingencies, the part where real war plans live or die. What happens when the Nazgul rise, their fell beasts folding the air around the eagle in a screaming spiral? Do you break altitude and dive, risking cliffs and arrow fire, or climb, where the ring whispers of power and the thin air frays the bearer's will? What if, halfway across the Black Plain, the ring turns its gaze on the eagle itself? Remember, it tempts the great more fiercely than the small. A proud, semi-divine spirit, suddenly imagining itself lord of the sky, could be far more dangerous than a hobbit. Pattern interrupt for a moment. What if the ring-bearer simply panics? A slip of the hand, a broken strap, a fall in the wrong ravine, and the ring is not in Orodruin. It is in an orc captain's fist. When we uncover all those layers, every realistic war room simulation turns the eagle strike into a lattice of failure points, far worse than a stealthy ground approach. And to see why the wise still choose the long, grey road on foot, we now have to look at the deeper story behind the story, what the ring does to those who dare to bear it. The ring hates shortcuts, corruption at altitude. The wise understand something chilling. The ring does not merely resist shortcuts, it hunts them. It leans toward the strong, the swift, the proud. Because if it can leap up the ladder of power in a single bound, the fate of Middle-earth is sealed far more quickly than by any slow corruption in a hobbit hole. We've already seen this pattern. When the ring comes within reach of the mighty, they recoil. Gandalf, who has walked the hidden centuries of the Third Age, will not even let Frodo press it into his hand. He steps back in almost physical horror because he has imagined what he would become. Not a grey wanderer on forgotten roads, but a tyrant robed in white fire. Galadriel, radiant in her ancient forest, stands beneath the stars and shows you the vision, herself as a queen, terrible and worshipped, and only with a shudder does she pass the test. Even Elrond, healer and lore master, will not bear it. The higher the spirit, the more catastrophic the fall. Now, let's step together into the thin, cold air above the mountains, because the eagles live there. And they are not immune. The great eagles are not taxes with feathers. They are high spirits close to Manwë, veterans in some sense of the War of Wrath, beings of sharp sight and great pride. They look down on the world from an altitude of judgment. Can we really imagine the ring ignoring that? If it whispers to a hobbit in the Shire, what does it murmur to an ancient lord of the upper airs? Imagine the ring's voice in an eagle's mind as the wind roars past its wings. You have seen the shadow from above, it says. You have watched orc torches crawl across the plains. Take me, and we will cleanse the skies. No more Nazgul, no more smoke from Orodruin. Rule from on high as a new Stormlord over Middle-earth. Not a servant of Sauron, not a plaything of men, but the true master of the winds. Is that really a temptation you or I can measure from the ground? Because here is the dark heart of this shortcut. A corrupted eagle is not just a failed plan. It is an apocalypse with feathers. Picture a ring-wraith equivalent that does not need a horse or a gate, a blazing will in the form of a vast hunter that can cross the realm in a single night. Whether it bends the knee to Sauron or sets itself up as a rival tyrant, the world below becomes a field of prey. And from the perspective of the wise, who have spent ages in deep dives into Middle-earth lore and long grey councils, that risk is intolerable. Giving the ring to such a being, even for a brief dash over the mountains, would be worse than handing it to Boromir at the height of his desperation. At least Boromir cannot fly. So as we journey into these what-ifs, the story behind the story becomes clear. The ring hates shortcuts because shortcuts give it leverage. And that is why the next choice of ring-bearer looks almost absurdly small. What the eye sees: visibility, distance, and doom. So as we journey into these what-ifs, the story behind the story becomes clear. The ring hates shortcuts because shortcuts give it leverage. And that is why the next choice of ring-bearer looks almost absurdly small. But now, imagine the opposite of small. Imagine an enormous shadow crossing the sky. On the map, it feels tempting. From the northern misty mountains, an eagle could cut southeast across Rohan, skim the plains and angle towards the Efelduath. From Gondor's borders, the line is even shorter, straight over Ithilien and into the broken teeth of Mordor. On parchment, those are clean, confident strokes. In the real geography of Middle-earth, you are talking hundreds of miles of hostile airspace, a full day or more of exposed flight even for a tireless, ancient Lord of the Winds. Altitude does not save you. It betrays you. The higher you fly, the farther you can be seen, a dark, moving mark against cloud or ash. Over Mordor, where the sky is a churning lid of smoke, a great eagle would not vanish into blue distance. It would be etched in perfect silhouette, wingbeats flashing against the red glare of Orodruin. You do not hide a bonfire by lifting it closer to the eye that is searching for light. And that eye is not just a poetic flourish. Sauron has spent long centuries bending the land itself into a system of watching. Towers along the mountains, signal fires, orc captains drilled to report anything strange. The Nazgul on fell beasts sweep the skies, hunting by terror as much as sight. When we uncover the phrase, the Eye of Sauron, we are looking at the organizing symbol of a surveillance state. Anything unusual in his air, one lone majestic eagle arrowing toward the mountain, would draw every gaze, every horn, every poisoned arrow. Compare that with the grey, crawling path of two hobbits. On the ground, a small hobbit and a loyal gardener can vanish into crevices, disappear under cloaks, smear themselves in the filth of Gorgoroth. They can put on orc armor, slump their shoulders, and shuffle in a column of the enemy until no one wants to look at them too closely. Not a blazing target in the sky, but a forgotten scrap on the road. That is the strategy of smallness. That is the fate of Middle-earth turning on what no eye thinks worth seeing. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, because here is the quiet terror under all of this. If Sauron is already nearly undone by a hobbit crawling through his own backyard, why would we ever trade that hidden, crawling chance for a single, glorious, utterly visible flight straight into his gaze? And if the skies are that dangerous, what waits there circling if an eagle actually tries? When eagles actually show up? Patterns of providence. What waits there circling is not mercy, it is judgment. And when eagles finally do break that terrible sky, they do it in a very particular way. Not as generals, not as couriers, but as the last wild note in a song that was already nearly finished. Think back to The Hobbit. The night is already a nightmare. Thorin and his company are treed by goblins and wargs, flames licking up the trunks, howls echoing through the dark. The whole hillside is a beacon of chaos, a signal fire against the ancient sky. Only then do the eagles come, sweeping down from their hidden eyries. They do not prevent the ambush. They do not stealthily extract the dwarves before the goblins arrive. They appear when the battle is fully exposed, when secrecy is gone and the world itself seems to be watching. Their rescue is deliverance, not strategy. It is eucatastrophe in its purest early form. We journey into the return of the king and see the same pattern, only now the stakes are the fate of Middle-earth itself. At the Black Gate, men and elves and dwarves stand in a grey, hopeless ring before Mordor, a tiny defiance against an ocean of shadow. When the eagles arrive, they are magnificent, yes, and they turn the tide of that visible battle in the sky, tearing at the Nazgul and driving them back. But notice the timing. Sauron is already fully distracted, his eye bent inward toward Frodo and Sam, in the heart of his own land. The ring is already at the brink. The eagles do not decide whether the ring is destroyed. They only shape how many survive the moment when it is. If we look back into the hidden centuries, into the Silmarillion and the War of Wrath, the pattern becomes even clearer. The eagles are there too, but again, not as covert insertion teams. They descend in an open, apocalyptic war when Beleriand is breaking and the very geography of the world is coming apart. They wheel through a sky already torn by dragons and lightning, acting as the high, terrible arm of Manwë in a conflict that can no longer be hidden. This is their natural mode, revelation, not espionage. So what do we uncover in all these wanderings of wing and wind? Eagles arrive when everything else has been spent. They are instruments of eucatastrophe, sudden grace that crowns long, costly struggle. To ask them to start the story by solving it, to make them the first resort instead of the last, would invert their narrative and even theological function in Tolkien's world. And here is the unsettling question that follows. If we remove that last, unexpected mercy, what does the road to Mordor look like when no eagle comes at all? The temptation of power. Why the strong cannot carry the ring. If no eagle comes, if there is no sudden rescue from the sky, we are forced to stare at the road itself, the long grey slog, the slow corrosions, and that is where we uncover Tolkien's real answer to the eagle question. Not in tactics, but in temptation. From the very beginning, the ring is framed as a test that the great must refuse. Remember Gandalf in Bag End when Frodo offers him the ring. He steps back as if from a live coal. His voice grows terrible. He confesses that with the ring, he would become a tyrant, too great and terrible to imagine. And so he will not even touch it. Not for a moment. Not to carry it across a room. If the wisest of the Astari will not hold it in his hand, why would he ever consent to lash it to the talons of a great eagle and send it flying above the world? We journey into the Golden Wood and see the same pattern, only heightened. Galadriel, ancient and beautiful, is offered the ring by a frightened hobbit. For a heartbeat, she lets the mask slip. She imagines herself as a queen, beautiful and terrible, adored and feared, setting the fate of Middle-earth from on high. In that vision, she is not cackling with wickedness. She is doing what she believes is good, but on her terms, in her power. Only when she refuses, when she chooses to diminish and remain Galadriel, does she pass the test. Let's step together into that logic and apply it to the eagles. These are not oversized pigeons with a taxi license. They are ancient spirits of might and majesty, bound up with Manwë and the high airs of the world. If Gandalf and Galadriel, who know the ring's peril in excruciating detail, fear to bear it, what of the proud lords of the wind? Would they not be tempted to say, "Give it to us. From the heights, we will order the world aright"? Can we really imagine the ring whispering to such beings and finding no purchase at all? The story behind the story is that the ring does not merely corrupt the wicked. It weaponizes good intentions. The more power you have, the more grand your vision of how you might wield it for the greater good. That is why Gandalf studies hobbits. That is why Elrond and Galadriel trust the Shire. Only the small, the overlooked, the humble can be trusted to carry such a burden without seeking to rule through it. Not warriors, not elf lords, not angelic eagles blazing across the sky. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, because this is the hard truth beneath the meme. To put the ring into the claws of a great eagle would not be a clever shortcut. It would be a betrayal of the entire moral architecture of the Lord of the Rings, a denial of its deep dives into Middle-earth lore about weakness, mercy, and hidden courage. And if we erase that, what kind of victory is left to reach at the end of the road. A different kind of plot hole. When stories refuse shortcuts. So when we ask, half-jokingly, why didn't they just take the eagles? We're not only poking at logistics, we're brushing against the bones of the tale itself, because not every missing shortcut is a mistake. Some are guardrails. When we talk about a plot hole, we usually mean a crack in the world, a contradiction, an oversight, a moment where the author simply didn't think through the consequences. A character forgets knowledge they had 2 scenes ago. A rule of magic is broken with no cost. We feel that jolt, that sense that the story behind the story has slipped. But there is another category entirely. Deliberate constraints where an author quietly says, "This road is closed, not because it could not exist, but because if it did, the whole shape of the tale would warp." Tolkien is doing that with the eagles. He has not forgotten them. They are in the Silmarillion, in The Hobbit, in the War of the Ring. They watch from the high airs, descend in the War of Wrath, break the siege of the Black Gate. They are ancient, semi-divine servants of Manwë, not medieval taxis circling Mordor, waiting for a grey wanderer to whistle. Their rarity is the point. If they could be summoned like a carriage, the ring quest would cease to be a long defeat, walked on bleeding feet, and become an airstrike. And that is the boundary Tolkien refuses to cross. The fate of Middle-earth in his imagination must hang on small hands, on hidden mercy, on roads walked in fear and perseverance. The absence of an eagle airlift is not a missing option. It is a line drawn to keep the story grounded in sacrifice and endurance. If the ring is destroyed by a sudden divine shortcut, what happens to Frodo's slow unmaking? To Sam's grey, stubborn loyalty? To the fragile courage of men and elves standing against the shadow with no guarantee of rescue from the sky? Other ancient tales make the same choice. The gods of Homer could pluck Odysseus from the sea at will, yet he wanders for years, shipwrecked and humbled, because the journey is where his soul is tested. In the old epics of the North, the Valkyries do not simply erase Ragnarok. The heroes ride to a doom they cannot avert. Even in this world, in our quieter age, we sense that an ordeal dodged is not the same as an ordeal endured. We journey into stories not just to see evil defeated, but to watch people become the kind of beings who can face it. So the eagle question becomes a lens. It forces us to ask, what kind of tale is the Lord of the Rings trying to be? A clever heist against a dark lord, or a pilgrimage through despair? A war of powers, or a long obedience in the same direction? All right, dim the lights, get comfortable. Because next, we'll stop speaking in abstractions and actually test the eagle plan against the beating heart of the narrative. Frodo's breaking and healing, Sam's vow at the edge of the world, and the fragile, suspicious alliances of the free peoples. When we put wings on the quest and lift it into the sky, what exactly do we lose on the ground? Frodo's road, what we lose if we fly. So let's test it on the one road that matters most. Not the eagle's flight paths, Frodo's feet. When we journey into the tale as it is actually told, we watch a quiet Shire dweller step out of a green, familiar world and onto ancient roads that will grind him down and remake him. The old forest presses in, dark and watchful. Barrow wights coil out of forgotten graves. In Moria, he sees a grey wizard fall into shadow and fire. In Lorien, he walks beneath golden leaves that seem to belong to another age of the world and learns that beauty can endure even with doom at the door. Every mile costs him. Every danger carves a line into his spirit. He crosses the Emin Muil, lost among broken teeth of stone. He staggers through the dead marshes where pale faces remember older wars. He crawls across the ashen plains of Mordor until the very air is await. This is not travel as background detail. This is the story behind the story. The slow unmaking of a hobbit so that he can carry a burden no one else can bear. Along the way, he does not just suffer. He chooses. He spares Gollum not once but again and again, when every instinct of self-preservation screams otherwise. He meets Faramir in Ithilien, resting for a brief, green interlude among falling water and fragrant herbs, and sees what a man of Gondor can be when he is free of the ring's call. Mercy, restraint, the refusal to dominate. These are not abstract virtues. They are hammered into him by hunger, fear, and the sight of others breaking under weights lighter than his. Now strip that away. Imagine Frodo's primary experience of the quest being 3 hours clinging to an eagle's back, wind in his face, the world a distant map beneath his feet. What bonds can he form with Sam when there are no long, grey, trudging days? What hard choices does he make when there are no crossroads, no doors to open or refuse, no Gollum to follow through the dark? What resilience can grow in him when the ring has barely had time to whisper? Here is the cruel truth. Even with all that wandering, he still fails. At the crack of doom, the ring wins. The only reason the fate of Middle-earth turns toward mercy is because of earlier choices, because a worn-down hobbit once stayed his hand over a wretch in the dark. Shorten the road, and that moment never exists. The failure comes faster. The world falls harder. So the tale does not need a quick flight. It needs a long walk into shadow, a slow breaking that makes his final collapse, and his quiet departure over the sea feel earned. Dim the lights, get comfortable, because next we uncover what that walk does to Sam, and why his steadfastness on those same roads may be the truest miracle in the whole trilogy. Samwise the Stowaway. Could an eagle carry two? Sam begins with a refusal, not of the quest, but of being left behind. In a quiet garden in the Shire, he is caught under the window, dragged inside and given a chance to bow out. He does not. That eavesdropping, that trembling insistence on going with Frodo, is the first small defiance of the Great Shadow. From that moment, the story behind the story of the ring is not just about a bearer. It is about a pair. And for hundreds of miles, across forgotten roads and ancient lands, Sam proves why that pairing can only truly happen on the ground. He is the one who watches while Frodo sleeps, who cooks what little they have, who fills the bottles at every muddy trickle of water. When the ring grows heavier, he shoulders the gear. When the gear is too much, he shoulders Frodo himself, climbing the grey ash slopes of Orodruin with his friend on his back. He fights Shelob alone in the dark, thinking Frodo dead, and still he will not take the ring for himself, even when no one is watching. Who else in this age refuses that kind of power in total secrecy? Now, imagine all of that, in the open air clinging to the back of an eagle. No hedges to hide behind, no rocks to shelter under, no chance for a whispered word at the campfire. Just two small figures exposed against the sky, visible for leagues to Nazgul on fell beasts and to every watchtower in Mordor. There is no space there for Sam to quietly take the heavier pack, to pretend he is not tired, to boil a bit of water so Frodo can have something warm. There is only spectacle. A straight line through the most dangerous sky in the world. On an eagle, Sam's love has no work to do. It cannot fetch, or mend, or carry. It can only cling. And Tolkien does not write love that way. He lets it move through the ordinary, cooking conies in Ithilien, arguing about seasoning, counting out the last crumbs of lembas, wrapping Frodo in his own cloak when the night wind rises. We journey into those small moments because they are how the ring is resisted day after day, not just in a single, blazing leap into a volcano. If an eagle simply delivers Frodo to the crack of doom, Sam becomes what the shortcut theory makes him. A sidekick in the corner of a grand aerial set piece, rather than the co-hero who walks every painful step. The fate of Middle-earth is not changed by one dramatic drop. It is changed by a gardener who will not let his master fall, even when the ground itself is against them. So the tale keeps its feet. Because in this story, friendship lives on the earth, in the dust and the dark. The sky belongs to other, more perilous powers, and we uncover why that matters when we finally look up at the eagles themselves. The Fellowship's fragile web, politics against the eagles. The sky belongs to other, more perilous powers. And now we look down from that height onto something far less glorious. Politics. Not the clash of armies, but the quieter, sharper clash of wounded pride, old griefs, and fragile trust. Because before anyone can ride an eagle into the heart of shadow, they have to survive the Council of Elrond. In that grey hall above the loud Bruinen, you remember how the air feels. Heavy, charged. Elves, men, dwarves, a wizard, and one very bewildered hobbit. The story behind the story of that council is not harmony. It is interruption, accusation, voices raised, hands on sword hilts. Gondor demands recognition, dwarves bristle at insult, elves remember ancient betrayals. And out of that tangle, after hours of argument, they barely agree on one thing. A small, secret fellowship must go on hidden roads, walking, not riding banners of war. Now imagine, in that atmosphere, someone quietly suggesting, why not the eagles? Watch the room stiffen. Gondor's pride speaks first. This is the last stronghold of men, the white city that has held the line for centuries while others faded into song. Are they now to sit idle while distant, untouchable powers decide the fate of Middle-earth from the clouds? Denethor is not present, but his mindset is, men must stand in their own strength, not hand their honor to winged saviors. Elrond's caution rises next. He has seen ages of catastrophe when great powers are invoked too quickly. He remembers the War of Wrath, the drowning of Beleriand, the ruin that comes when the Valar and their servants move openly in the world. To call the eagles as the primary plan is to risk turning a desperate errand into a second breaking of the world. Why would he gamble the last remnant of the West on such a single, blinding throw? Legolas, with Sindarin memories and Sylvan experience, would know the Nazgul in the air. He has heard of fell beasts over the dead marshes, of a sky that is no longer free. He could tell them that any great winged assault would meet not empty wind, but Sauron's most terrifying hunters. And Gandalf, who has refused the ring from Frodo's own shaking hand, would fear something deeper. The ring's song in the ears of high spirits. If it can nearly unmake a Maya in grey robes, what might it whisper to a proud, ancient lord of the upper airs? So we uncover a subtler truth. To many in that council, entrusting everything to the eagles would feel less like bold strategy and more like surrendering their fate to remote, half-divine arbiters they cannot command, cannot even fully understand. No king of men rules them. No elf lord binds them. They come when they will, as in The Hobbit, on the edges of disaster, not as hired wings. By contrast, the chosen plan does something the Eagle Gambit never could. A walking fellowship of elf, dwarf, men, wizard, and hobbits binds the free peoples into one shared risk. Every step south is a declaration. We will not wait for salvation from on high. We will stake our own lives on this road. The alliance is not just signed in Elrond's house, it is walked into the dust together. And even if, in some quiet corner, Gandalf could have won the Eagle's consent, the political will to entrust them with everything might never have taken flight. Too many fears, too much pride, too much memory, which leaves us with a haunting question as we journey into the next layer of this mystery. If the Council could not agree to rule the skies, what happens when the skies themselves start to answer, on their own terms? Gandalf's silence. If it were that simple, he'd have said so, on their own terms. And here is where the silence grows loud. Because in that council chamber in Rivendell, with maps spread and tempers rising, there is one person who has walked more grey roads and watched more ages turn than almost anyone else in the room. Gandalf does not merely know the eagles exist. He has leaned on their wings in the darkest hours of his wanderings. Remember Orthanc. Imprisoned on the pinnacle of Saruman's Black Tower, staff taken, escape impossible, Gandalf does not whistle hopefully into the wind and cross his fingers. He calls Gwaihir by name. The Windlord comes because there is an ancient friendship there, the residue of alliances that reach back into the hidden centuries when the Valar still moved openly against the shadow. Later, after Moria, it is again Gwaihir who bears him, broken and burned, from the peak of Zirak-Zigil. This is not ignorance, this is intimacy. And for nearly 2,000 years before any hobbit ever dreamt of the ring leaving the Shire, Gandalf has been studying Sauron. He has walked the borders of Mirkwood, crept into Dol Guldur twice, argued in the White Council, watched the Nazgul rise and the world grow thin with fear. He knows the enemy's eyes, on the ground and in the sky. If we journey into his long memory, we uncover a mind that has rehearsed every conceivable path to Mordor, including the one that flies. So when he sits in Elrond's house and lays out the hard road, the secret road, his refusal to even float an eagle plan is not an oversight. It is a verdict. The story behind the story is that by the time we arrive at that council, Gandalf has already weighed that idea against everything he knows of Sauron's air patrols, the Nazgul on fell beasts, the fire of the eye, and against something deeper, the peril of power itself. And he has discarded it. Here's the pattern interrupt. Gandalf is not trying to win quickly, he is trying to win rightly. As a Maya sent in frail human form, forbidden to dominate wills or to play warlord, he is haunted by what happens when overwhelming force becomes the answer to every problem. That is Sauron's road. That is Saruman's fall. To place the fate of Middle-earth on a single, blazing display of skyborn might would be to trust the very logic the ring embodies. Gandalf's instinct is always to go small, to go quiet, to go humble. Hobbits instead of heroes, rangers instead of armies, a trudging hidden fellowship instead of a storm of wings beating toward Orodruin. If we trust his wisdom at all, we must trust that this was not cowardice or failure of imagination, but conviction. Dim the lights, get comfortable, because in the next part, we'll step together into Gandalf's deepest fear. Not Sauron's strength, but what the ring would do to any great power that tried to bear it, even an eagle. Nazgul versus eagles, the aerial battle we never see. And so, if Gandalf will not trust the ring to an eagle's strength, what happens if we imagine the road he refused to walk? What if, instead of two hobbits crawling through ash and shadow, we journey into an aerial war no one in the tale ever sees, but that hangs over the fate of Middle-earth like a storm cloud? Picture the skies above Mordor, not empty, not free, but ruled. High in that grey, choking air, the Nazgul ride their winged mounts, vast, leathery fell beasts, tireless and unrelenting, their wings beating like the pulse of Sauron's will. They do not merely fly, they hunt. They scout the plains and the mountains, sweeping the horizons for the faintest glimmer of hope, and wherever they pass, courage withers. Their coming is announced by that shattering screech, and beneath it rides the black breath, a despair that seeps into the bones of men and elves alike. Now set against them the great eagles. Not pets, not taxis, but ancient, proud spirits, kin in some measure to the Maya, who once watched the war of wrath from the high airs above Beleriand. They have fought dragons. They have stooped upon Balrogs. They are free, not bound to any ring or throne, and their allegiance is to Manwë and to the music of the world itself. Yet even they are not beyond fear, nor beyond the ring's whisper. The more exalted the heart, the more terrible the fall, and the ring was forged to ensnare the mighty first. So let's step together into the hidden centuries of what if. Imagine one, perhaps 3 eagles, sweeping low over the Ethel Duath, a small cloaked figure clinging to the feathers, that golden circle hidden but not silent. Below, Gorgoroth smoulders. Above, the eye is searching. And then, far off, 9 dark shapes turn as one. The fell beasts converge, not with the clumsiness of beasts, but with the precision of a single malice. How long before Sauron feels the ring's nearness blazing in his mind like fire? In that clash, it is not only beak against talon or feather against scale. It is a war of wills. The Nazgul carry the black breath with them. Their very nearness is a poison. We have seen captains of Gondor crumble, great kings of Rohan falter, a shield maiden and a hobbit nearly die under that invisible weight. What would it do to a ring-bearer exposed on an eagle's back, with no earth beneath, no friend's hand to hold? What would it do to the eagle itself, as the ring presses into its thoughts, promising dominion over every sky? When we uncover that unseen dogfight, it stops feeling like a clever shortcut and starts looking like a gamble with everything on the table. To stake the world on 9 Nazgul, failing to bring down a few targets in the open sky, is to trust in luck, not in wisdom. 2 small hobbits crawling through back roads and forgotten passes can pass beneath the notice of the eye. A storm of wings cannot. And this is where Gandalf's real dread begins. Not only that the eagles might fall, but that, if they did not, the ring might claim them. In the next part, we'll follow that fear to its end and ask what the ring would make of any great power that tried to wield it, from wizard to queen to lord of the eagles. Weight and wing. Can an eagle even carry this burden? So let's pause on that terror for a moment and give it weight. Not mythic weight, not meme weight, but the drag on wings and bone, and will that any real flight into the shadow would demand. Because when we journey into the eagles part of the story, we're not talking about tireless sky gods on call. We're talking about great beings who strain, who tire, who bleed. Think back to how Tolkien actually shows them. In The Hobbit, they snatch Thorin's company from the burning trees only after the goblins and wargs have already revealed themselves with fire and howling. It's a brief, desperate dash, not a long grey procession across half the world. In The Lord of the Rings, they come to the Black Gate at the very end in a single, blazing sortie. And at Mount Doom, they do not cruise in casually. They dive into a collapsing battlefield, grab 2 starving hobbits and turn straight for home. Rescues, raids, never cargo flights. Now imagine what a ring mission would really require. Not just Frodo's body, but mail and cloak, food and water, perhaps some measure of armor against arrows. Maybe even another companion, Because who would dare send a ring-bearer alone into that age of darkness? Every pound added to that burden steals from an eagle's speed, from its height, from the razor edge of maneuver that keeps it alive when spears and black-feathered arrows rise from below. And the ring itself is not a neutral passenger. We uncover again and again that it grows heavier as it draws nearer to its master, not only on the shoulders of hobbits but on the hearts of all who bear it. Frodo staggers under it. Sam feels it as a crushing stone. Gandalf and Galadriel will not even touch it, knowing what it would make of their power. Why should we imagine that an immortal eagle, keen of mind and proud of heart, would be immune to that same spiritual gravity? Picture an encumbered eagle over Mordor. Slower, lower, forced into predictable arcs as it lines up for the one gap in the mountains, the one road of air that leads toward Orodruin. Above, the Nazgul on fell beasts, bred for this very war of the upper airs. Below, watchtowers, siege engines, and the unblinking eye, scouring the red sky for exactly such a challenge. One clipped wing, one moment of cloud lit by sudden fire, and the ring is falling into enemy hands. This is the story behind the story. Even if the ring is small, its unseen weight gnaws at focus and resolve, fraying the concentration needed to thread those hidden roads of wind. The fantasy of an invulnerable eagle courier, tireless and untouched, is our projection, not Tolkien's text. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, because in the next breath, we'll ask a harder question. If an eagle or a queen or a wizard did seize that burden and survive the flight, what new power would rise from the ashes of Barad-dûr? Providence, not plot armor. How help actually works in LotR. What new power would rise from the ashes of Barad-dûr? To answer that, we have to talk about something Tolkien loved to name, but we rarely pause to feel: eucatastrophe. Not a cheap miracle, not a reset button, but that sudden, piercing turn from near despair to unexpected joy. Tolkien says it does not deny sorrow and failure. It takes them fully into itself, and then, in one breathtaking instant, it bends them toward a joy beyond what the characters could have engineered. Think of the eagles in that light. They do not arrive to cancel the long, grey wanderings, the burned feet, the dead friends. They do not rewind Boromir's fall or unmake Gollum's centuries of corruption. When they sweep over the Black Gate, it is not to erase the cost of the war, but to stop it from curdling into absolute ruin. The journey remains terrible, the scars remain, but the fate of Middle-earth is not utter darkness. This is where we journey into providence, not plot armor. In Tolkien's world, help does come from beyond the circles of the world, but it does not kick down the door before anyone inside has chosen who they are. Providence respects the slow, painful work of free will. Gandalf refuses the ring. Galadriel passes her test. Aragorn walks the hidden roads of the dead. Frodo and Sam crawl, quite literally, as far as they can go. Only when those choices are made and nearly spent does the sudden turn become possible. Notice how the eagles always follow that pattern. In The Hobbit, they come after Bilbo has already leapt into danger, after Thorin's pride has already led him into fire and wolves and war. At the Battle of the Morannon, they appear only when the West has marched to what looks like certain death, not to spare them the march. And at Mount Doom, they do not airlift Frodo to a safe, sterile victory. The ring has already taken his will. Gollum has already fallen. The mountain has already exploded. If an eagle had carried the ring from the Shire, that would not be eucatastrophe. That would be preemption. It would turn grace into a scheduling hack, providence into a delivery service. No long obedience in the same direction, No testing of the small and the weak. No space for the hidden courage of a gardener to matter. The story behind the story would collapse into someone more powerful handled it. So when we uncover the eagles at the end, try to see them not as finally doing the obvious thing, but as the last echo of mercy after every other strength has broken. Not a shortcut, but a hand catching the falling after the leap has already been made. And as we step together into the ash-choked sky over Orodruin in the next section, we'll ask one more unsettling question. What if even that last echo had failed? A quick breather in the Eagle's Eyrie, community check-in. But before we let that question drag us all the way down into the fire, let's climb for a moment instead. Imagine we're no longer on the ash-choked slopes of Orodruin, but perched together on a high eyrie, stone cold beneath our hands, thin wind in our faces, the world of Middle-earth spread like an ancient map below. The plains of Gorgoroth are a grey stain to the east. Rohan rolls like a sea of grass to the west, and far beyond, the Shire is only a soft green memory on the horizon. From up here, the roads we've been walking in this video, Gandalf's hidden wanderings, the slow rise of Sauron, the long watch of the wise, all shrink into fine lines on parchment. Not a mere plot hole, not simply a meme about bird taxis, but the story behind the story of how the fate of Middle-earth is bound to wings and wind and timing. While we rest on this ledge together, I want to invite you into the tale a little more directly. Down in the comments, tell us, what is your favourite eagle moment in all of Tolkien's ages? Is it their first thunderous arrival in The Hobbit when they sweep down out of the night to snatch Thorin's company from the burning trees? Is it the eagles wheeling above the Black Gate, colliding with the Nazgul in that last desperate clash of sky and shadow? Or is it something more obscure from the hidden centuries of the Silmarillion, when they watched from the heights of Thangorodrim? And while you're there, share the fan theory you most want us to unpack next. Do you want more deep dives into Middle-earth lore about the Blue Wizards in the East? About Tom Bombadil and the Ring? About what Gandalf was really doing in those quiet decades between great wars? We uncover more of these forgotten questions when we know which roads you're most eager to walk. If you've been journeying with us this far, you already know this channel lives on long-form wanderings, not quick shortcuts. So, gently, without pressure. If you tap like or share this with that one friend who won't stop bringing up the eagles at parties, it genuinely helps these slower, quieter explorations find more wanderers who think in plot holes, but love deeper answers. Because from this height, you can see where we're heading next. We're about to glide back down into the heart of the Lord of the Rings itself and ask how this eagle question reframes Gandalf's whole mission, Frodo's terrible courage, and even the way Sauron understands power. What changes if the sky was never a safe road at all? What changes if mercy, not might, is the only current the eagles will ever ride? All right, dim the lights, get comfortable again, and hold on to the edge of the eyrie. Let's step together into the wind, lean forward, and let the next part of the argument carry us, as if we're leaping from this perch and gliding over the dark lands toward the end of the Third Age. The Shire from the sky. Why hobbits must stay small. From that height, the Shire is almost nothing, a soft green smudge, a quilt of fields and hedgerows, stitched with silver threads of river and road, tucked into the western edge of the world. From an eagle's wings, even Hobbiton is only a scatter of pale dots, a faint smoke haze, a quiet, forgettable corner in an ancient land where empires rise and fall in fire. You could glide right over it. You could never know that anything of the fate of Middle-earth would ever pass through those round little doors. From above, it is background, terrain. a patch on the map between the grey sea and the distant shadow of the misty mountains. But the story refuses to stay up there. Tolkien drags us down through the clouds, past the wheeling eagles, through the low mist, until our feet are in the mud of Bywater, and the kettle is singing in Bag End. Not a green smudge now, but green beans on a plate. Not anonymous dots of light, but candles on Bilbo's birthday cake. We journey into pantries and pipeweed jars, into songs about bath time and second breakfast. The camera, if you like, is set at hobbit height, and that choice is everything, because what is the ring if we only ever see it from the sky? A problem piece on a strategy board. One more token to be moved across a map of mountains and rivers, where Mordor is a red circle and Minas Tirith a white one. From an eagle's eye view, you count distances, not dinners. You track armies, not anniversaries. Tolkien will not let that happen. His roads are walked at 3 miles an hour with sore feet and empty stomachs. He lingers on mushrooms, on the sound of a kettle lid rattling, on the way a party tree looks when lanterns are hung in its branches. This is the story behind the story of war and kings, the ordinary goodness that the quest is meant to protect. If we don't feel the weight of a garden gate closing behind Frodo, why should we care when the black gate of Mordor swings open? All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, and think about how often he could have pulled the camera back. He knew maps. He drew them. He had every excuse to turn his world into a grand strategy chart of the Third Age, with arrows and dates and tidy campaigns. But his love is always for the local, the particular, the forgotten lane and the unexpected inn. He resists the godlike vantage point, even though, as creator, he owns it. So when we ask why not just fly, we're also asking, why not just think like a general and be done with it? And the answer is that generals live in abstractions. Hobbits live in potatoes. The quest must be carried at hobbit height, not eagle height, or the ring becomes an idea instead of a poison. Let's step together into that smallness, because only there can we uncover what is truly being risked, and what, if grace holds, will be saved. Sauron's blind spot, why he never expects hobbits, not eagles. And that smallness is exactly where Sauron cannot see. In the Black Tower of Barad-dûr, the eye sweeps the plains, the mountains, even the very air above Mordor. Sauron's gaze is tireless, but his imagination is narrow. He understands armies. He understands kings. He understands rings as instruments of domination. What he cannot fathom is someone taking the One Ring, the very heart of his power, and walking toward a volcano with the intention of throwing it away. Not claiming it, not bargaining with it, destroying it. Tolkien tells us this plainly. Sauron simply cannot conceive that any will would use the ring except to wield power. His mind has been forged over ancient ages of conquest and command. For him, the fate of Middle-earth is a chessboard of great pieces, elven lords, Númenórean captains, dark captains on winged beasts. In that game, eagles absolutely have a place. They are known quantities remembered from the First Age and the War of Wrath, when the great birds of Manwë tore dragons from the sky. So when we journey into Sauron's calculations, what does he prepare for? He fortifies the passes with orcs and engines. He arms the skies with Nazgûl on fell beasts, with archers on the walls of Mordor, with watchfires and signal towers. An eagle strike, a bold dash through the grey clouds toward Orodruin, is exactly the kind of move he expects. Power against power, speed against terror. A contest in the open air where the ring-bearer is a visible target, and the eye is already looking up. If you send the eagles, you are stepping into a world Sauron understands perfectly. That is his arena. That is where he has already won countless times over centuries of war. Even if an eagle could endure the ring's whispering, even if its Maya spark gave it some resistance, the flight itself would blaze like a beacon in his mind. No stealth, no doubt, no misdirection, only a straight line drawn in fire to the one place he guards most. But hobbits are not on the board. They are beneath it. To Sauron, they are a provincial curiosity somewhere in the west, if he has heard of them at all. He never imagines that such small, unambitious folk could carry the ring, let alone bring it into the very heart of his realm. That is his blind spot, the hidden gap in an otherwise impenetrable armor. And this is the story behind the story. By choosing hobbits, the wise refuse to fight on Sauron's terms. They abandon the grand gesture in favor of the quiet road. They trust in what he cannot measure: mercy, pity, resilience in the face of temptation. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, because the next step is even stranger. How do you build an entire war strategy around people your enemy doesn't believe exist? Let's step together into that paradox, and into the one decision that almost shatters it. The Eagle Plan in canon. Did anyone ever consider it? So we have our paradox, an enemy who cannot measure hobbits, and a war that seems to hinge on them. And in that silence, a modern voice always pipes up. All right, but why not just take the eagles? To answer that, we journey into the councils themselves, into the rooms where the fate of Middle-earth is actually debated. At the Council of Elrond, you have almost every kind of power in the Third Age gathered around one table. Elrond with his ancient memory, Gandalf with his grey wanderings, Glóin and the dwarves, Boromir of Gondor, Legolas out of the Greenwood, and a hobbit who barely understands what world he has stepped into. They argue for hours. Great roads, secret ways, open war, casting the ring into the sea. Not once does anyone say, "Let us call the eagles and be done." That absence is not a typo. It is the story behind the story. Watch how the pattern holds. When Gandalf speaks later with Aragorn, with Faramir in the wild lands of Ithilien, or when Denethor broods in the high chambers of Minas Tirith, their strategies turn on secrecy, on decoys, on the long grey shadow of open battle, drawing Sauron's eye away from a small companion on a hidden road. They speak of mustering riders, of marching to the Black Gate, of fire and siege and despair. Again, no one drafts an air campaign. No one proposes an eagle vanguard. And yet the eagles are not forgotten in the text. They appear as sudden messengers in The Hobbit, as scouts above the Battle of the Five Armies, as last-minute rescuers at the Battle of the Morannon, and over the fires of Orodruin. Not generals, not taxis. When they move, it is like a wind from an older age, rare and uncommanded, never the centerpiece of a mortal war plan. That pattern is too consistent to be an accident. Here is the pattern interrupt. Elrond and Gandalf know the eagles personally. Gandalf rides with Gwaihir more than once. Elrond has memories stretching back into the hidden centuries of Beleriand, when the eagles served Manwë in the War of Wrath. If an eagle plan were remotely plausible, these are the two who would suggest it first, argue for it hardest, and yet they do not even raise it as a bad idea to be rejected. Why? Their silence is itself a loud, deliberate line of world-building. It tells us that in-universe, among the wise, the eagles are not a tool to be scheduled, but powers on the edge of the world, whose aid cannot be presumed, whose nearness to the divine and to the ring's peril makes them dangerous to involve. The councils do not forget them. The councils rule them out before the meeting even begins. So perhaps the real question is not, why did Tolkien forget the eagles? But What did his characters already know that we are missing? Hold that thought, because next we uncover who the eagles truly are, and why flying straight into Mordor's sky would be less a shortcut and more a self-annihilating charge. If it failed, the catastrophe of a lost eagle and ring. So let's test this so-called shortcut, not in a meme, but in the world as Tolkien actually built it. Let's step together into the worst possible timeline. We journey into the sky above Mordor, not as spectators, but as if our whole hope hangs from a single set of talons. An eagle beats its vast wings over the ash-choked plains. Below, the slag heaps of Gorgoroth glow, the roads crawl with orcs, and the eye is waking. In its claws, the ring. Not on a chain, not safely wrapped in hobbit cloak, but exposed, gleaming, calling. An arrow hisses past. A Nazgul screams. The eagle jinks just once, and the ring slips. It falls spinning, not into the fire, but into the broken rock of Mordor itself. Imagine the silence in that moment. Then imagine the orcs who find it. This is not a neutral outcome. There is no try again flight. In that instant, the ancient weapon returns to its master. A captain of Sauron's hosts seizes it, trembling, half mad with desire, and before he can even dream of rebellion, the will in Barad-dûr closes like a fist. The ring is on the road to the Dark Tower, and the fate of Middle-earth is sealed long before any fellowship can be formed. One slip, one gust of wind, one arrow, the world ends. But there is a darker branch of this story behind the story. The ring does not fall, the eagle does. Ensnared by a Nazgul on fell beast, dragged down over the slag and thorns, it is taken alive. Remember, these are not mere animals. They are proud, near-angelic beings, kin in spirit to the Maiar. Now picture such a mind under Barad-dûr, broken on the wheel of Sauron's ancient cruelty, forced to gaze upon the ring until love of the high airs turns to hunger for dominion. What emerges is a new terror, a great winged hunter that once served the west, now circling above Mordor's mountains, its keen sight and memory bent to the enemy's will. The skies themselves become an extension of the eye. Where could anyone hide then? And even if the ring and the eagle are both lost, the attempt itself is a catastrophe. A blazing chase across the heavens, a fallen lord of the winds, Nazgul wheeling in full pursuit. This is not subtle. From that hour, Sauron knows exactly what his enemies intend, to bring the ring to the fire. Every road, every hidden pass, every grey valley leading toward Orodruin becomes a death trap. There are no more stealth options after a spectacle like that. Contrast this with the path we actually see. Two hobbits, nearly forgotten by the great, crawling through ash and shadow while Sauron stares outward at armies and banners. Even when Frodo stands upon the cracks of doom, the Dark Lord does not understand, not fully, until the ring is already at the edge. His blindness lasts to the final heartbeat. From a risk management view, then, the Eagle plan is not a clever hack. It is an all-in gamble with apocalyptic downside, staking the entire age on perfect execution in the brightest, most watched sky in the world. The ground-based plan looks slow, even foolish, but it keeps the enemy in the dark until the knife is at his throat. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, because next, we uncover what the eagles themselves might have said to such a proposal, and why their own ancient wisdom would turn them away from this doomed flight. Dragons, Balrogs, and the First Age. What eagles are built. 4. So when we imagine the eagles answering that airmail to Mount Doom proposal, we can't stay in the Third Age. We have to look backward, far backward. We journey into an older world when their wings first darkened the sky over an enemy far greater than Sauron. In the First Age, before hobbits, before the Shire, the great eagles are not rescue birds on standby. They are the shock troops of the heavens. Thorondor, greatest of them, spans 30 fathoms from wingtip to wingtip. He claws through the clouds above Angband, Morgoth's fortress, and in one of the most mythic moments of the Silmarillion, he stoops down upon the dark enemy himself, tearing his face and leaving scars that will never heal. Not a taxi service, not an airlift, a living judgment from on high. Time and again, Thorondor descends into the grey smoke of that ancient war. He lifts Fingon from the precipices of Thangorodrim after a desperate rescue of Maedhros. He bears wounded heroes from battlefields where dragons crawl and balrogs stride, contesting the skies against creatures of fire and shadow. These are open wars, sung in great lays, where armies clash in daylight and the very mountains ring with steel. And at the end of that age comes the War of Wrath. Let's step together into that cataclysm for a moment. The Valar finally move in force, host upon host out of the west, Maya and elven kings, and above them the eagles in unnumbered flight. Dragons rise, led by Ankalagan the Black, and the battle in the upper airs is so fierce that when Ankalagan falls, his ruin breaks the towers of Thangorodrim, and the lands of Beleriand drown beneath the sea. The world is literally reshaped. Shorelines vanish, kingdoms pass into legend. That is what it looks like when the powers of the West and their eagles decide to end an age. It works, but it is not clean. It is not precise. It leaves scars on creation itself, a drowned continent, a shattered north, wounds that Middle-earth will carry for long centuries. After that, the strategy changes. The story behind the story is that the Valar grow wary of direct, overwhelming force. Numenor's fall is another warning. Intervene too openly, and pride and ruin follow. By the Third Age, the war against Sauron is no longer a bright clash of banners. It is a long, hidden struggle, waged through small hands and quiet wanderings, designed to avoid another Beleriand, another Numenor. Can you feel how different that is from eagles versus dragons in the noon sky? The eagles, then, are veterans of that older mode of war. They remember the dragons that blotted out the sun, the balrogs that leapt to meet them in midair, the command to pour out everything in one final, world-breaking blow. In the Third Age, they still answer when the need is absolute, but only then, and only in harmony with a subtler, more sacrificial plan, centered on a hobbit's lonely road. So what happens when that ancient, storm-forged wisdom looks at the idea of flying the ring straight into Mordor's eye? In the next part, we uncover just how quickly that plan burns up under First Age scrutiny. Why the Valar don't send an airstrike, and why that matters. And when we hold that First Age scrutiny on the problem, the question of eagle taxis suddenly widens. It stops being, why didn't they just fly? And becomes, why don't the powers behind the eagles simply end this whole dark age themselves? To answer that, we journey into a much older catastrophe, one that literally reshaped the world. Long before the ring is ever forged, the greatest kingdom of men rises from the sea, Numenor. Blessed by the Valar, it stands halfway between Middle-earth and the Undying Lands, a bridge of honor and restraint. For centuries its mariners sail the grey waves, bringing wisdom and healing to the Westlands. But the shadow of Sauron coils even there, whispering of death and envy, until at last the Númenóreans turn their eyes toward the forbidden west and demand the immortality of the elves. Not content to receive, they will seize. Here the Valar do what many fans wish they would always do. They intervene openly. They call upon Eru himself, and the world is broken. Numenor is drowned, its proud cities hurled beneath the sea, and the very shape of Arda is changed. The straight road to the west, pulled away from the circles of the world. It is salvation and judgment in one tidal wave. And it is, in Tolkien's imagination, a line in the sand. After Numenor, the Valar withdraw. Not in abandonment, but in a different mode of care. No more great armadas of the west. No more war of wrath, shattering mountains. No more visible hosts marching to decide the fate of Middle-earth. From this point on, the roads of history belong more fully to elves and men, to their courage and their failures, under a sky where help is real but rarely obvious. The age of direct governance yields to the age of hidden guidance. So when we ask for an eagle airstrike on Barad-dûr, we are, in a way, asking the Valar to undo their own hard-won restraint. A sudden, overwhelming assault led by their heralds in the sky would not just be a clever tactic, it would be a return to the very pattern that ended in sunken Numenor and a bent world. The story behind the story is that the Valar have learned. They will still answer, but not in a way that makes every crisis into a second war of wrath. Gandalf and the Eagles live inside this new humility. They are emissaries, not occupiers. The Astari are expressly forbidden to dominate the wills of elves and men. They are sent to kindle hearts, not to command armies. In the same way, the Eagles descend at need, to rescue a burned company from goblins, to bear Gandalf from Orthanc, to lift Frodo and Sam from the fire. But they do not become a permanent air force. Their wanderings across the hidden centuries are acts of mercy, not tools of conquest. Here is the quiet pattern interrupt Tolkien offers. The absence of an eagle-born ring mission is not a plot hole, but a theological decision. It is part of a long meditation on divine hiddenness and the dignity of creaturely freedom. What kind of victory would it be if the West simply crushed Sauron from above, while the free peoples watched from below? Instead, the ring must be carried on foot by the small and the afraid, so that their trust, their pity, and even their weariness become woven into the world's healing. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, because in the next part we uncover how this restraint plays out tactically. When you really map Mordor's skies, what happens to those dream flights on Eagleback? From sky to ground, how pre-LOTR history sets up the answer. So when we map those Mordor skies and watch our dream of an easy flight go down in black flame, we have to ask a deeper question. How did we even get to a world where the real hope walks instead of flies? To answer that, we journey into the hidden centuries before Frodo ever leaves the Shire, into the long grey wanderings of Gandalf and the high, bright watch of the Eagles. For nearly 2,000 years, Gandalf moves quietly through the north, a pilgrim of the small and the forgotten. He stirs hearts in Dale and in the scattered kingdoms of men, strengthening chieftains of the Dúnedain, sitting by low fires with people whose names never enter the great chronicles. He slips into Dol Guldur, twice under shadow, testing the necromancer, resisting Sauron's will not with armies, but with courage and patience. And all the while he is watching hobbits, learning their simple joys and stubborn decency, letting this little people reshape his whole sense of how the fate of Middle-earth will be decided. Above him, on the high winds, the eagles keep their own long vigil. They are not taxi birds waiting for a call. They are ancient spirits of the air, the eyes of Manwë still turned toward the wounded world. They bear messages from the north. They spy out the movements of orcs. They descend in sudden, blazing interventions when fire and war already roar below. But they do not sit in councils. They do not draw maps of invasion. They do not scheme over rings and kingdoms. They are witnesses and messengers, not generals. And for all those centuries as we uncover in these deep dives into Middle-earth lore, the pattern is the same. Gandalf builds downwards, not upwards. He gathers friendships instead of fortresses. He heals rather than conquers. He backs Thorin's quest not to crown a new warlord, but to remove Smaug from the board, so that some future hobbit can walk east under slightly clearer skies. If the endgame were meant to be an eagle strike, wouldn't this age look different? We would see airy fortresses, training of riders, secret plans between Elrond and Manwë to launch a final assault from the clouds. Instead, the whole weight of history leans toward a small council in Rivendell, where the choice is made for a hidden road and a fellowship of the lowly. That decision is not a last-minute twist. It is the story behind the story. The Council of Elrond simply reveals what centuries of wandering have already decided. Victory will come, if it comes at all, through secrecy, humility, and shared burden, not shock and awe from the sky. So when we ask, why not the eagles, we're really testing whether we've listened to that long prelude. Have we heard the quiet music beneath the battles? All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, because next we'll take that history and press it right up against Mordor's map and see how the skies themselves answer the eagle question. Rereading the trilogy through the eagle. Question, so let's do it. Let's actually press that history up against the map and rewalk the tale with the eagle question in our hands. Not as a complaint this time, but as a lantern. As we journey into the familiar scenes, we uncover how much the skies are already telling us about the fate of Middle-earth. Begin at Orthanc. A grey tower, a grey wizard, a prison without doors. When Gwaihir comes beating out of the sunset to pluck Gandalf from Saruman's pinnacle, it can feel, on a first read, like a convenient escape hatch. But look again. The eagle does not carry Gandalf to Mordor, or to the Shire, or to instant victory. He sets him down with a borrowed horse and a long road still ahead. The story behind the story is that this is not a shortcut. It is a preservation. Gandalf is spared not to bypass the long, hidden wanderings of counsel and persuasion, but to continue them. Now jump forward to the Black Gate. The world is trembling. The age of men is on a knife edge. Aragorn leads an army that knows with a terrible clarity that they cannot win. They march not to conquer but to distract, to buy a few more fragile heartbeats for two hobbits disappearing into ash and shadow. When the eagles wheel out of the eastern light to clash with the Nazgul, they are not flipping the battle's outcome. They are crowning the courage already spent. Their arrival is like a final chord, resolving a song men began when they chose to walk towards certain death. And then Mount Doom. Fire, ruin, the mountain breaking, the ring undone at last. Notice the order. First the ring is destroyed, the eye collapses, Sauron falls. Only then do the eagles come. They do not co-author the victory, they bear witness to it, and then they bear away its broken instruments. Frodo and Sam are not passengers on some divine delivery service. They are carried out as wreckage from a task already completed, a mercy flight for two souls who walked every mile of that ancient road. But maybe the clearest answer comes from where the skies stay empty. Weathertop, where black riders close in and there is no sudden wind from on high. Moria, where the dark eats torchlight and no winged rescue pierces the stone. Shelob's lair, where even the star glass feels small. In these places the eagles do not come, and the silence above the characters is almost theological. The story is committed to letting them walk through darkness. So here's the invitation. On your next reread or rewatch, dim the lights, get comfortable, and trace this pattern. Ask, where do the eagles move, and where do they refrain? Let's step together into those pages again and see them not as missed opportunities, but as rare blazing notes of grace. Because once you see that, another question rises from the ash. If the eagles are grace, then what exactly is resisting them? The real cost of an easy answer. If the eagles are grace, then resisting them is the cost of meaning. Because the moment we say, fine, just fly the ring in, we don't only shorten the road, we erase whole lives. Think of what vanishes first. Frodo and Sam never crawl through the ash of Mordor together, sharing that last drink of water, that last broken crust of bread. There is no quiet promise in the dark of Shirith Ungol. No, I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you. Their friendship becomes a brief travel arrangement, not a bond hammered, cracked, and remade in the grey shadow of despair. And if we journey into this world for anything, it is for that slow, painful welding of two small hearts against the weight of an ancient evil. Without the long roads, Aragorn never truly proves himself. He does not lead the paths of the dead, or stand on the Pelennor as the standard of Elendil unfurls in the wind. A king airdropped into victory is not a king we trust. It is through weary marches, impossible choices, and that mad ride to the Black Gate that we uncover the story behind the story. A man who earns his crown not by birth alone, but by endurance. Faramir's quiet nobility, gone. We never see him refuse the ring in the wilds of Ithilien, never hear him say, I would not take this thing if it lay by the highway. In an eagle plan, there is no space for a captain who chooses mercy over glory. Eowyn's defiance fades too. There is no long winter in Meduseld, no secret preparation for battle, no I am no man, shouted into the face of an ancient terror. The age of small, defiant acts collapses into a single aerial strike. And with it, the sense of a vast, lived-in world thins to almost nothing. No slow wanderings through the Shire and Bree, no haunted barrows, no Lorien at dusk, no dead marshes reflecting forgotten faces. Middle-earth stops feeling like a place you could walk and becomes a target on a map. A quick mission, not a pilgrimage. Here is the deeper loss, the one that reaches out of the page toward us. We draw strength from their endurance, from Sam lighting a little fire on the endless plain, from Frodo taking one more step when there is no reason left. Those scenes train our imaginations. They whisper, you too can go a little further than you think. But a world where the eagles solve everything? That world teaches us to wait, to look up at the sky for rescue instead of becoming the kind of people who walk into Mordor with shaking hands and steady wills. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable and really feel that contrast for a moment. Which story prepares us for the fate of Middle-earth and for our own small ages of trial? The cost of not using the eagles, the tears, the miles, the fear, the courage, is exactly what makes The Lord of the Rings one of the most beloved stories of the last century. Remove that cost, and you don't just change the ending, you unmake the world. Why the meme persists, our modern hunger for hacks. And yet, the Eagle Plan will not die. It circles our timelines and comment sections like a meme that refuses to land, because it is tapping into something very modern in us, something the ancient roads of Middle-earth were never built to carry. We live in an age of optimization. Every journey is mapped to the fastest route. Every morning ritual is a productivity stack. Every ad promises one weird trick to solve problems that have haunted the human heart for centuries. Not a walk, not a pilgrimage, but a hack. We count steps, shave seconds, automate, outsource, and scroll past anything that looks like slow, patient labor. Of course, we look at the long, grey wanderings of the Fellowship and think, there has to be an easier way. That is exactly why the Eagles feel so satisfying. They are the ultimate workaround, the fantasy of a clever exception to the rules of the world. You keep the aesthetic of the quest, the grandeur of Mordor, the fire and the ash at the end. But you skip the plodding miles, the aching feet, the terror in the dark. It lets us enjoy the story behind the story without paying the story's price. In a culture trained to ask, can this be done faster? The eagle meme is simply our optimization instinct wearing feathered wings. Tolkien's imagination, though, was formed in a different age. His was a slower, agrarian and war-scarred sensibility, shaped by trenches and fields, by the long obedience of tilling earth and burying friends. He did not trust quick fixes. He honored endurance, patience, and the acceptance of suffering as part of how a soul is made. When we journey into his world, we are stepping into a place where you walk to Mordor, because walking is what changes you and what reveals who you truly are. So here is where it becomes uncomfortably close to home. Where do we, in our own lives, go hunting for eagles? Where do we instinctively search for an airlift out of hardship instead of the slow, faithful road through it? We look for the app that will heal our attention, the planner that will fix our time, the secret that will make relationships painless. We want the victory of Mount Doom without the choking climb up its ash-choked slopes. Let's step together into that tension for a moment. If we stop asking, why didn't they use the eagles? And start asking, why do I want them to? The question turns. It begins to press on how we think about our own quests, our own fates in this age of hurry. And as we uncover the practical, in-world reasons the eagles do not simply fly the ring to its end, we may find that Tolkien is quietly inviting us to renounce a whole way of living. Because once you see why the sky is closed over Mordor, you may start to notice where the skies are meant to stay closed in your own story. And why the only faithful way forward is still, step by hidden step, along the ancient road. From plot hole to portal. What this question really opened. So when we pull back from the maps and the battle plans, what do we see? We began with a meme, a throwaway joke about calling Middle-earth's air Uber, and we've ended up staring at an ancient sky that is anything but open. The question that sounded like a shortcut has become a doorway into the long, grey architecture of Tolkien's world. We've watched the eagles change in our minds from convenient taxis into what they really are. Semi-divine messengers, tied to Manwë and the high airs above the world, closer to angels than oversized pigeons. They appear at the breaking points of ages, in the War of Wrath, at the Black Gate, on the slopes of Orodruin, not as a delivery service, but as a sign that the fate of Middle-earth is brushing against the will beyond the circles of the world. We've traced Mordor upward as well as inward, from a land of ash and rock into a fortified sky. Fell beasts and Nazgûl scouring the clouds, watchtowers pricking the horizon, the eye sweeping the plains, so that even a hobbit on the ground can barely move, unseen. We journey into that airspace and realize this is not an empty road, it is a battlefield. A ring-bearer on an eagle's back would be flying straight into the teeth of Sauron's true domain. And then there is the ring itself, hating shortcuts, punishing presumption. We uncover that every time someone powerful reaches for efficiency, Gandalf, Galadriel, even the idea of handing it to an eagle, the story recoils. The ring does not want to be used, it wants to be yielded to. It tempts most fiercely those who might imagine they could manage it from a height, above the mud and the fear and the slow, humiliating walk. So when we ask, why not just fly? We are really testing whether humility is optional. Could the world be saved by a surgical airstrike instead of by two half-starved hobbits crawling through the dust? Could an age-old evil be solved by logistics instead of by mercy and pity and failure? Tolkien's answer, woven into these hidden centuries of lore, is no. Not in this story, not in this world. And this is where that meme question secretly shines. Good stories can bear this pressure. When we press on the eagles, the sky does not crack. It reveals layers of design, geography, theology, character, fate, all interlocked. What looked like a plot hole becomes the story behind the story. So what happens if we treat but why didn't they just... Moments in Tolkien the same way. The scouring of the Shire, Tom Bombadil, the long wanderings of Gandalf himself. Each apparent oddity might be a portal into deeper intention if we're willing to walk, not leap, through it. Because in the end, the eagles did not fail the tale by refusing to fly Frodo into Mordor. They fulfilled their role in a world where redemption must be walked toward, step by painful step, until the very end. And in our final reframing, we're going to see just how different this story would be if the sky had opened too soon. Gandalf, the eagles, and the long game of hope. And that's where we have to come back to the Grey Pilgrim and his silent allies in the high air. Gandalf's answer to the shadow is never a single, blinding stroke. For nearly 2,000 years he walks the forgotten roads of Middle-earth, not as a general mustering armies, but as a guest at small tables, a teller of stories by humble hearths. He nudges a took toward adventure, strengthens a ranger's resolve in some rainy inn, kindles dwarf pride into a quest that will one day shake a dragon from his hoard. Not a conqueror, not a king, a patient gardener of courage. And for all those centuries the eagles watch as well. High above the grey world, beyond the sight of men and hobbits, they circle the edges of great events, answering not to councils or captains, but to Manwë and the older music of the world. They do not descend to carry kings to their coronations or thieves to easy plunder. They come when fire and ruin have already broken the silence, when the story behind the story demands that someone keep a remnant from being crushed entirely. Think of it. They snatch Thorin's company from the burning pines only after the goblins and wargs have revealed themselves in full fury. They sweep into the battle of the Morannon only when the eye is turned wholly outward and the ring's fate hangs by a thread in the cracks of an ancient mountain. They are not taxes. They are witnesses who intervene at the brink, trusting that the small and weak have already done their part below. So when we ask almost impatiently, why didn't they just fly the ring to Mordor? We're really asking why these long-game players refused the shortcut. And the answer is unsettlingly hopeful. Their refusal is not cowardice, not oversight, but faith. Faith that the path laid out by higher wisdom is not meant to be hacked apart by convenience, faith that humble feet on hard roads matter to the fate of Middle-earth in a way no sudden flight ever could. There is a quiet heroism in not using the power you have access to. Gandalf will not touch the ring because he knows it would twist both him and the tale. Galadriel turns from the terrible queen she could become. The eagles who could have tried to bear ring-bearer or ring itself instead choose restraint, because to seize that role would drag them from servants of the West into contenders for its dominion. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, and picture the end. The Barad-dûr has fallen. The great eye is quenched. Ash drifts over a broken age, And there, above the ruin, Gwaihir bears Gandalf once more, not as a weapon, but as a witness. Two old servants of the West look out over a world saved not by their might, but by a hobbit's endurance and a long, hidden centuries' labour of hope. And yet, even in that victory, there is one more flight to make, one more rescue that will show us exactly how far this trust in smallness truly goes. Your next journey through Middle-earth. They rise from the ruin and the fire, two small shapes on Gwaihir's back, and for a moment the whole war narrows to that single flight through ash and light. That is what the eagles are for, not shortcuts, salvations. When we gather all these threads, the answer to the old question becomes clearer. The eagles do not fly the ring to Mordor because of who they are, because of what Sauron commands, because of how the ring poisons every will that nears it, and because of the kind of story Tolkien is telling. Not a tale of divine airstrikes, not a convenient air taxi service, but a long grey road of endurance where the high and ancient powers move rarely and almost always as rescue, not as strategy. We journey into this with different eyes now. The great eagles are not oversized birds waiting for a quest notification. They are proud spirits bound to Manwë, kin to the winds that broke Thangorodrim in the First Age. In the War of the Ring, they are flying into a sky ruled by the Nazgûl on fell beasts, under an eye that misses almost nothing, over a land ringed with mountains, watchtowers, and fire. A stealth flight to Orodruin is not a clever exploit in the game of Middle-earth. It is a straight charge into the very element Sauron controls best. And even if they could pass the spears and the shadows, the ring waits. It tempts the mighty more fiercely than the humble. Gandalf will not touch it. Galadriel will not take it. Tom Bombadil, in his strange way, will not be bound to it. Why would we imagine that the proud, keen-sighted eagles would be safe as ring-bearers, or even as ring-couriers brushing that gold for a heartbeat as they carry it? The fate of Middle-earth hangs on choosing the one path that does not rely on overwhelming power, but on a hobbit's worn feet. So when you next return to the Council of Elrond, watch how carefully that path is chosen. Notice how every easy answer is weighed and set aside until only this fragile fellowship remains. When you walk again with Aragorn and the captains to the Black Gate, see their march as a deliberate shout in the dark, drawing every gaze away so that two nearly forgotten wanderers can climb unseen. And when the eagles come at the end, above the gate and over the fire, remember, this is not a plan finally executed. This is mercy. From here, there are other roads to follow. Why doesn't Tom Bombadil simply pocket the ring and sing the age away? Why do the Valar not return in bright wrath to end Sauron as they ended Morgoth? How does Providence move in other worlds you love, where magic and freedom and fate collide in different patterns? These questions are not annoyances to be swatted aside. They are invitations, doorways into the story, behind the story. Each one lets us sit a little closer to the fire with Tolkien himself, feeling how carefully he balances power and pity, eagles and hobbits, the hidden and the seen. So dim the lights. Get comfortable under your blanket and let this answer settle into the next time you read or rewatch. Let's step together into those familiar scenes with new understanding, and then, gently, we'll bank the coals of this little lore fire and send you back into your own night, knowing that there are always more deep dives into Middle-earth lore waiting just beyond the next page, the next scene, the next quiet question that will not quite let you go. Before you leave the Eyrie, a final invitation. So before we let the fire burn down to embers and the last feathered shadow of these ancient eagles slips back into the high air, let's linger a moment longer here together. We've walked strange roads tonight, from Manway's windy halls to the ash-choked skies over Mordor, and the story behind the story has shifted, just a little, under our feet. Somewhere along this flight, something probably clicked for you. Maybe it was realizing that the great eagles are nearer to angels than oversized taxis, sworn to the will of the West, not the whims of wizards. Maybe it was imagining the ring's malice reaching upward, whispering even to a Sky Lord's proud heart. Or perhaps it was seeing Mordor not as an empty map corner, but as a no-fly zone of Nazgul, archers, and the unblinking eye. Tell us down in the comments, which moment in this journey most changed how you see the eagles or the ring itself? Dim the lights, get comfortable, and think of this as part of our little ritual. You share your piece of the tale, someone else answers, and slowly we uncover a chorus of perspectives that makes this world feel less like ink on a page and more like a living age we journey into together. Did a single line from Tolkien resurface? Did a scene from the films suddenly feel heavier? We'd love to read the echoes. And since we're already perched on the Ares edge, looking out over the hidden centuries of Middle-earth, help choose the next road. What plot hole shall we walk through side by side? Do we vanish into the woods after Tom Bombadil and ask why the ring slips from his concern like a child's toy? Do we stand beneath the shadow of Balrogs and finally decide whether those wings can truly bear them? Do we follow Glorfindel's bright, half-forgotten wanderings from Gondolin to the grey roads of the Third Age? Or is there some stranger question tugging at you, waiting in the comments to be named? If this kind of long, late-night lore fire feels like home, you're invited to stay. Subscribing, leaving a like, exploring the other deep dives into Middle-earth lore on this channel that isn't just feeding an algorithm, it's joining a small fellowship of late-night lore walkers and long-form listeners who keep returning to ask, quietly, how the fate of Middle-earth was really decided. Ahead of us lie more wanderings. We'll trace Gandalf's forgotten journeys into the south and east, where rumors of blue wizards and broken kingdoms still cling to the wind. We'll uncover the hidden history of Numenor, from its radiant dawn to the moment its proud towers vanished beneath the sea. What did Gandalf see there, in the drowned memories of men? What secrets slept in those waves, waiting for Sauron to twist them? For now, we bank the coals. May the wind under your wings bear you where the sun sails and the moon walks, until we meet again in another story. And in the next question that will not quite let you go. Appendix 1. Quick lore recap for casual viewers. So before we journey into more intricate arguments and edge case hypotheticals, let's pause on the ridge for a moment and look back over the road we've walked. This is our little lore campfire. A quick map for anyone who loves the films, maybe has heard whispers of the Silmarillion, but doesn't quite want to memorize the entire family tree of the Valar just yet. First, the eagles. In the films, they sweep in like living comets, and it's tempting to think of them as Middle-earth's emergency taxi service. But in Tolkien's world, they are far closer to angels than animals. Vast, near-immortal spirits tied to Manwë, the Lord of the Winds, who watches the fate of Middle-earth from the heights of the ancient world. They appear in the First Age during the War of Wrath. They haunt the peaks above Gondolin and Thangorodrim, and they act when the will of the West stirs them, not when someone politely waves a hobbit-sized flag. Opposite them, you have Sauron's sky. By the time of the War of the Ring, Mordor's air is not empty blue, it is a weapon. The Nazgul ride fell beasts that wheel over battlefields and roads, hunting by fear as much as by sight. Watchtowers, archers, siege engines, and the eye itself make the land around Orodruin a no-fly zone in the most literal, mythic sense. Remember how the ring-wraiths find Frodo at the ford, or how Minas Tirith cowers when the winged shadows pass overhead. Now, imagine trying to slip a bright, great eagle through that net, carrying the single object Sauron is most desperate to see. At the heart of all this is the ring, not just a magic trinket, but a fragment of Sauron's own will, designed to corrupt, to dominate, to whisper. It tempts the powerful more fiercely than the humble. Gandalf refuses it. Galadriel passes her test. Even Tom Bombadil is treated as an exception that proves the rule. Give such a thing to a proud, mighty being, and you are not removing a problem. You may be forging a new Dark Lord with wings. Here is the pattern interrupt, the place where we uncover the story behind the story. Tolkien himself tells us in letters and in his deep dives into Middle-earth lore that the eagles are not meant as a regular transport system. They arrive as eucatastrophe, as sudden grace, when all other roads have failed and a higher power intervenes. They are miracles, not mail coaches. And if you didn't know any of that, that's all right. Truly, no one is born knowing what a Maya is or why the First Age matters. Curiosity is enough. Every question, why not fly the ring, is a doorway. So dim the lights, get comfortable, because as we step together into the next layer, we'll see how those questions lead us further into the hidden centuries and the quiet decisions that shaped this grey, shadowed world. Appendix 2. Common counter-arguments gently answered. So let's stay with that curiosity for a moment, because most of the remaining but what-if paths all circle the same mountain. The first is the stealth, high-altitude drop. You've probably heard it. An eagle flies so high Sauron cannot see, then dives straight into the cracks of doom, in and out before the eye can blink. Clean, surgical. But when we journey into the skies over Mordor, as Tolkien actually describes them, the air is not empty. Nazgul on fell beasts patrol that ancient darkness, sweeping the clouds, sensing fear and power. The eye is not a lighthouse with a limited beam. It is a will spread over a whole land, hunting for the ring. Mordor is ringed with mountains and watchtowers precisely so that anything unusual, an eagle silhouette against the grey haze, a sudden dive from the heights, draws attention. Not a hidden highway, a killing ground. And the closer you fly to Orodruin, the stronger the ring's call becomes, especially to a proud, mighty spirit. Then there is the bigger distraction idea. Just send a vast army to the Black Gate, keep Sauron staring north, and slip the eagles by on the flank. But that is already the story behind the story. Aragorn's march to the Morannon is exactly this desperate gamble, a small host making itself look like the whole hope of the West, to pull every eye and every Nazgul away from two hobbits. If you add eagles carrying the ring into that equation, you do not reduce risk, you concentrate it. One arrow, one panicked turn, one Nazgul cry overhead, and the fate of Middle-earth falls flaming into the wrong hands. What about smaller messengers? Crows, sparrows, some hidden animals slipping through cracks in the rock. Here we uncover another quiet rule. The ring is not a parcel. It resists being merely transported. It wants a will it can work on, a mind it can dominate. The closer you bring any bearer into that shadowed land, the more it presses to be used, to be claimed. And even if a bird could somehow carry it in, the ring does not unmake itself. Someone has to choose to cast it away. That is why the long roads of Frodo and Sam matter. The destruction must be intentional, at the very edge of despair. Sometimes people ask, half joking, "Fine, then blindfold the eagles. Don't tell them what they carry." But now we step into an ethical fog. These are not beasts of burden. They are ancient, speaking beings, allies of Manwë from the First Age. To trick them into bearing the ring would be to repeat, in miniature, the very sin of domination the ring embodies. And practically, ignorance does not shield you. Gandalf refuses the ring even while knowing almost nothing of its final journey. Galadriel trembles just to imagine accepting it. Power feels power. So when we treat these thought experiments as gentle stress tests rather than gotchas, we start to see their real gift. They push us back toward the themes Tolkien is weaving: humility over shortcuts, walking rather than flying, bearing rather than bypassing. All right, dim the lights. Get comfortable, because as we step together into the next section, we'll leave the eagles circling far above and follow Gandalf's own hidden centuries of planning that made the slow road to Mordor possible at all. Appendix 3. Real-world inspirations behind Tolkien's eagles. But before we leave those wings behind entirely, we journey into one last question. Where did these eagles come from in Tolkien's imagination, and why do they feel so ancient, so charged with meaning, every time they cross the sky? In the grey mists of our own world's myths, great birds have always hovered near the throne of the divine. In Norse legend, the eagle sits atop Yggdrasil, the world tree, a silent watcher over the 9 realms. In Christian tradition, the eagle becomes a sign of John the Evangelist, a vision that soars beyond the ordinary, of the soul lifted toward heaven. Across other ages and cultures, you find thunderbirds, sky spirits, winged messengers that bridge earth and the high, hidden places. Tolkien drank deeply from these wells. When his eagles wheel above the mountains, we're not just seeing big animals, we're seeing the echo of a long, tangled history of sky guardians and heralds of the upper air. But Tolkien's own lifetime adds a darker layer. He fought in the trenches of the First World War. He watched the Second World War turn the sky itself into a battlefield of bombers, searchlights, and surveillance. Flight became a symbol of liberation and of terror. The same heavens that once held angels and eagles now held machines raining fire. Can you imagine how that would mark a mind already steeped in ancient tales of the upper airs? And so, the eagles in Middle-earth carry this ambivalence. They are majestic, liberating, radiant against the shadow, yet they also arrive as overwhelming force, as sudden, decisive power from above. Not quite weapons, not quite angels, but something in between. When they descend at the Battle of the Five Armies, or at the Black Gate, they tilt the fate of the world with a single sweep of their wings. It is thrilling. It is also dangerous. Power that looks down from a great height is always tempted to dominate. Tolkien knew that. He had seen empires try. At the same time, he loved wild things with a fierce, almost homesick tenderness. His letters talk about trees, about birds, about the quiet roads and hedgerows of the English countryside he feared to lose to industrial smoke. A mind like that is not going to turn an ancient sky spirit into a fantasy taxi service. The eagles remain their own people, with their own will, their own wanderings, responding to Manwë and to the great music of the world, rather than to every desperate plan hatched on the ground. So when we uncover the story behind the story, their rarity makes sense. They appear at hinges of history, not as everyday tools, but as awe-inspiring visitations. And that, in the end, is one more reason they do not simply shuttle hobbits to Mordor. To use them like that would drag them down from the high airs into mere convenience, and Tolkien refuses. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, because in the next part, we'll leave myth and metaphor behind and step together into the hard logistics of Mordor's skies, Sauron's watching eye, and why a straight flight would have been a death sentence long before Mount Doom. Last light over the mountains. A quiet farewell. So now, after all the deep dives into Middle-earth lore, after air defenses and ring corruption and the hard geometry of Mordor's mountains, we come back to where we began. An eagle over the ash plains, the red glare of Orodruin beneath its wings. You can still see it, can't you? That clean, impossible line of flight straight to the cracks of doom. But now it feels different. Not a missed shortcut, not a plot hole. Just a thought experiment, a bright, tempting path that belongs to the realm of what if, rather than the real, ancient story Tolkien actually told. We've seen why the eagles are not taxis, why the ring would poison any great spirit that bore it, why Mordor's sky is a killing ground watched by Nazgul and the Eye. So we can let that image go, gently, almost with affection. Imagine the camera high above that eagle, then pulling back. Mordor shrinks. The ash and iron and shadow become a smudge at the edge of the world. We journey into the wider map, over the broken teeth of the Ethel Duath, over Osgiliath's ruins, over the green fields of Rohan, where riders once looked east in fear. The roads of war fall away beneath us, and the age of great battles feels suddenly small. Farther back. The Anduin becomes a silver thread. Rivendell appears, hidden among its waterfalls, where a grey wanderer once laid a ring on a small wooden table and changed the fate of Middle-earth with a quiet council. Back again to Bag End's round door, to a birthday party under lanterns, to a hobbit who never wanted to be part of any of this. And farther still to the Grey Havens, where another ship waits in the westering light, and a white gull cries over an emptying shore. When we pull back like this, we uncover the story behind the story. Not just eagles and Nazgul and strategies, but the long, ordinary walks. Frodo and Sam on the slag heaps, Aragorn on forgotten roads, Gandalf himself pacing centuries of doubt and hope. And you have walked a little of that with us, across this video, across these hidden centuries of lore and argument and imagination. So, let's step together into one last thought. What if not every problem in our own world has, or should have, an eagle waiting in the wings? What if some burdens are meant to be carried step by step, with blisters and bad weather, and the quiet courage of just not giving up? It's tempting to wait for the great rescue, the sudden flight out of danger. But most of the time we're called to be hobbits, not eagles. Carry that with you if you like. The next time a road feels long, remember that the great tales are rarely about shortcuts. They're about companions, about small mercies, about getting there at all. So here is our last, simple blessing in the mode of Gandalf the Grey. May your roads be safe, may your friends be good, and may you find courage for all the long, ordinary walks ahead. And until our next journey into this world of shadows and light, farewell for now.